right, friends, just getting ready to be ready. Getting everything together. All right, friends. Good evening. Good evening. Coming to you from the control room. Grand Theft World control room on the west side of the country. How are you doing out there? Hope this Tuesday is treating you well. This is the Monday, Sunday leftover show on a Tuesday. Feels like a Monday to me. I hope it doesn't feel like a Monday to you. So I hope you're doing well out there. Got some regular friends in the chat. Welcome B1, welcome Megavente, welcome Adam Alexander. Welcome the Turd Burglar. Yona, welcome. Mystery One. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hope you all had a fine and dandy Christmas. Spent it with family and friends. And if you caught last night's show, Grand Theft World, episode 112, we did it on a Monday. If you caught it, you already know, I'm guessing. You put two and two together. All right. I'm going to have to keep it short tonight. Relatively short. I've got to get up and milk cows. Be down there at 7 a.m. So, time is of the essence. Let's jump over to freedomunitedrevolt.com, home of the LD Mondays, Sunday Leftovers blog page. Hopefully more coming on that site soon. You can see the options, value for value support. I've got a P.O. box. You can send me stuff. Buy me a coffee, subscribe star. The Alby Lightning address. Trying to get some sats flowing in and other options. And if you haven't been to grandtheftworld.com, you're not a part of the community, I think there's still a chance to be the 1025th member over at Grand Theft World, and a chance to get some swag from the Freedom United Revolt t-shirt store. Hopefully we'll have another shirt up there thanks to our good friend B1. Something that came to be in the midst of last week's stream. But the Grand Theft World community, we're moving off of Discord. Oh, that's not it. Where is it? Anyway, we're moving off of Discord to Circle. So we have a Grand Theft World forum fired up over there. Let's see what's going on here. GrandTheftWorld.com. You can find the show notes and replays to download video embedded via Odyssey. You've got the show notes, highlighted what we went over last night. And I don't know if you know this, but you can download the audio only from the website right here at the bottom of the page. You can right click, download the MP3. Not many know this, I don't think. Looks like you can play it right from the page, the episode page. Of course, we've got the brain model available on that tab over at Grand Theft World. That's Richard's work, where he's compiled a whole bunch of connections, people, institutions, ideas that he's been tracking for more than a decade. You can check out the video, his History Connected video on Technopoly by Neil Postman at the bottom of that page. And if you missed it last night, we're talking about January 15th, Richard's mindset workshop, the autonomy mindset workshop. I'll throw a link in the show notes to that. We are going to be live streaming that. There's a chance to get in there and work live with other participants and set your goals. Get ready for the new year, 2023. So go and check that out if you are interested. There's a 3-hour workshop. It's going to be Sunday, January 15th. So it'll be a peek into what goes on inside the autonomy community. I'm sure some of you have heard about it. So I wanted to, just run through a bunch of stuff that we didn't get to on the show card last night. And we're going to start off with checking out a little Tucker Carlson talking about Ukraine. What is the goal in Ukraine? We're going to go through some Ukraine stuff, some Twitter stuff, and some of the bioweapon research state stuff, gain of function. We might even touch on winter vagina, metaphorically speaking, or you know what I mean. We've got a little bit about FTX, and we've got a conversation between Jay Dyer and Bryson Gray. So we're going to get to some interesting stuff. I hope we'll keep it rolling for a bit. Not too late. So let's check in with Tucker Carlson, see what he has to say about the goal in Ukraine.
As far as we know, no one's ever addressed the United States Congress in a sweatshirt before, but they love him much more than they love you. Welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Remember when Sam Bankman-Fried showed up in Washington wearing a T-shirt and spouting nonsense, and all the self-described geniuses declared him a hero? The media, the Congress, the White House, they all love this weird little guy called Sam Bankman-Fried. Do you remember that? Somehow we were reminded of it today when the president of Ukraine arrived at the White House dressed like the manager of a strip club and started to demand money. Amazingly, no one threw him out. Instead, they did whatever he wanted. American taxpayers declared Joe Biden will continue to give Zelensky whatever he demands for, quote, as long as it takes. Tellingly, Biden never specified what it is, as long as it takes to do what? Push the Russian army back to pre-invasion borders? Sounds reasonable. That's what most Americans likely assume, those who are still paying attention. But that is not what Zelensky means, and it is not what he is asking for. Zelensky is demanding regime change in Russia, just like in Iraq and Libya and a long list of other failed states, except this time in the heart of the Eurasian landmass, next door to the entire civilized world. That's what Zelensky has called for repeatedly, and every dollar we send to him goes toward that end. And at this point, he's getting a lot closer to achieving it. So what happens if he, quote, wins? What does the ensuing chaos look like? Thought about that? Who's going to secure the world's largest nuclear arsenal once we help Zelensky topple the Russian government? Who replaces Putin? Strangely, those topics did not come up today, because that wasn't the point. The point of today's visit to Washington was not to make the world more stable or make wise decisions, much less to help America. That's always at the bottom of the list. The point was to fawn over the Ukrainian strip club manager and hand him billions more dollars from our own crumbling economy. It is hard, in fact, it may be impossible to imagine a more humiliating scenario for the greatest country on earth. And we would love to blame Joe Biden for it, but we can't really, not entirely at least. This was bipartisan masochism. The Uniparty is alive and well, despite the best efforts of voters, including last month. And if you doubt that it's alive and well, here's a picture of Zelensky that he had taken with a group of elderly Republican senators in Kiev back in May. They stand grinning next to him in their orthopedic shoes, 70-year-old Susan Collins, John Barrasso, John Cornyn, led by their 80-year-old ringleader, Mitch McConnell. 44-year-old Zelensky poses between them in a skin-tight polo shirt, flexing like a weightlifter and trying to look ferocious. They seem awestruck. Not since a young Fidel Castro showed up in New York wearing battle fatigues has this country's aging leadership class tittered more loudly in delight. They love a man in uniform. What a hunk. so strong and decisive. Look at the expression on Mitch McConnell's face. You can almost hear the giggles of pleasure. No rational person assessing the issues ever would have predicted this moment. If you were a Republican office holder and Zelensky came to Washington, maybe you would, for a moment, ask him about his current and ongoing war against Christianity in Ukraine, especially if you were, say, Mitch McConnell or John Cornyn, and a lot of your own voters go to church on Sunday. They might care about that issue. But McConnell and Cornyn didn't mention that. They didn't say a word. You will not hear a word on television tonight about the fact that Zelensky has banned an entire ancient Christian denomination in Ukraine and then seized churches and then thrown priests into jail. According to Mitch McConnell, who apparently hasn't left his office since the mid-'80s, anti-Christian despotism is what most Republicans want above all. They don't get enough. They're just begging for it. Watch McConnell explain.
Providing assistance for the Ukrainians to defeat the Russians, that's the number one priority for the United States right now, according to most Republicans. That's sort of how we see the challenges confronting the country at the moment.
And two other senators stand behind him, nodding like it's true. Defeating Putin is, quote, the number one priority among Republicans, says Mitch McConnell, who leads Republicans in the Senate. Number one? Before our own economy? Or our own children's schools? Or for that matter, before the more than 2,000 young people killed last year by fentanyl in Mitch McConnell's, quote, home state of Kentucky? Punishing Vladimir Putin for putting Donald Trump in office is more important than all of that, says Mitch McConnell. Ukraine's borders matter. Ours don't matter. You may have suspected they thought that, but at this point, they're just coming out and saying it's right in your face. And of course, the White House agrees completely. Watch Mitch McConnell announce today that you'll be paying for ever more advanced weapon systems to be sent to Ukraine, whether you like it or not.
We're going to continue to strengthen Ukraine's ability to defend itself, particularly air defense, and that's why we're going to be providing Ukraine with Patriot missile battery and training your forces to be able to accurately use it.
He's reading his little script. Maybe it was written by the defense contractors that just hosted an event in Washington for the Ukrainian ambassador. Literally, they put their logos on the invitation, just in case there was any question about what's going on here. So this is a big change from what we had, say, last month. But you wouldn't know that from the media coverage of it. Your average reporter in Washington likes Zelensky a lot more than he likes you. So nobody asked about it. But this is a major policy change. It was just a few months ago that a senior U.S. defense official said, and we're quoting, there is no discussion about putting a Patriot battery in Ukraine. In order to do that, you would have to put U.S. troops with it to operate. In other words, you would have to fight a hot war against Russia, which has not only not been approved by the Congress, but most Americans have no idea that's happening. But now it is happening. Did you know that? Are you for that? Is it the most important thing? More important than your nephew dying of fentanyl? Yes, says Mitch McConnell. But it's just the beginning. Because as you just saw, Zelensky has arrived in Washington to make more demands. He's the house guest who would not leave. And every moment we tolerate him, the demands become bigger. In case you missed it, here's part of what he said just a moment ago.
Financial assistance is also critically important, and I would like to thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for both financial packages you have already provided us with and the ones you may be willing to decide on. Your money is not charity. It's an investment in the global security and democracy that we handle in the most responsible way.
So the leader of a foreign government dressed in a sweatshirt waltzes into the United States Congress and starts demanding money, and then has the gall to tell the people sitting there who are giving him tens of billions of dollars more of your money that it's not charity, it's an investment. Really, what are the returns on that? And by the way, what's the point of it? What is the goal here? What's the justification for it? Do we have a historic debt to Ukraine? Do we have a historic animosity with a non-Soviet Russia? No. How do we win here? What's in it for us? Isn't this our country? And where do you get off talking to us like that? Do we hate ourselves so much? Do we have so little respect for the United States of America that we'll put up with that will applaud it? Thank you, sir. May I have another? What's wrong with us? What's wrong with our leaders? And where's this going?
Good questions. from the tuck. You know, I think we hit this topic a lot last night. Rich was making the point, you know, oh, we had a 30-year Cold War and now we're just going to do regime change. How do we get to where that's acceptable with people? And yeah, you don't need to hear me go on about anything, do you? In particular, I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy that people are putting up with this show puppet. We showed the origin story of Zelensky, the comedian who would be president. It's in your face, in the Ukrainian people's face, and I can't help but wonder if something was learned by the development and elevation of Donald Trump and just applied over there. And maybe I should check the timeline on that. When was Zelensky elected? Okay, 2019, yeah. Boy, that seems like a long time ago now. April 22nd, 2019. According to the BBC. Ukraine election. Comedian Zelensky wins presidency by a landslide. Boy, those were different times. I remember hearing and chuckling. But, yeah, I mean, Donald Trump remains the greatest stand-up occupant of the Oval that this nation's had. I'll give Joe props for his style of, what is it? I can't remember. Somebody pointed it out to me, but Joe's acting, Joe's comedic relief in his bumbling, fumbling, and which brings me to, I don't know if y'all saw this. Joe channeling Poppy Bush with his David Copperfield joke. I know. I mean, that's a ridiculously long arm. I did notice that. So I guess take this with a grain of salt. I mean, we also have this picture. So, all right. Let's get it together. But, oh yes, shout out to the Last American Vagabond, who is back to using his pirate Twitter account after briefly being reinstated. It's been debunked. Really? It is funny though. It took me a while to notice how long that arm was before staring at that photo. Like, wow. Anyway, I believe Volodymyr was on a sweatshirt selling tour. $100 a pop to support the efforts. You can look like Cokie Smurf. Shit, for $100 you can get a couple of hoodies and a t-shirt over at freedomunitedrevolt.com. No joke. Not a joke. Not a joke, folks. Hey, there's a Liberty Radio Twitter account. Shout out to the Drizzle, who's apparently been beaten down on Twitter. Maybe got the permanent shutdown. I hope not. But yeah, let's check in on. No, I don't have that on this browser. Yeah, the Grand Theft World at @theft_world doesn't look like it's coming back. Doesn't look like it's coming back. So, not holding my breath. Of course, we had this appeal from Volodymyr before he headed over to the States. Put Ye back on Elion. I didn't notice the Elion. Of course, we have the horrible, horrible, no good Raelian symbol that apparently got Ye yeeted. Or was it that picture of Ari Emanuel squirting down Elon on the back of a yacht? Crazy stuff. All right. Well, I want to check out this summary. If you'll forgive me, sorry, OP, but we're gonna listen to what Russell Brand has to say for a few minutes. So bear with me. We'll just see what of value he does have to say. Let's check it out.
Zelensky is a hero and he's in Washington. And as you know, there's nothing else to discover and two things can't be true at the same time. For example, the military-industrial complex can't be hugely profiting from this conflict, and also Joe Biden can't be training troops and selling missiles and increasing budgets and making the Pentagon unaccountable for all of their expenditure, because that would mean Zelensky's not a hero anymore, and that would be too confusing, and you can't cope with confusion, can ya? Zelensky is in Washington on some kind of victory tour, high-fiving Tom Cruise of the military type experience. And I know there's some complexity in his backstory, but he's a performer who's become a political leader. One day, maybe, baby. I'm not anti-Zelensky. What I am pro is you being given the complexity of potential ulterior narratives that are not being explained or espoused. Not just unilateral stories of goodies and baddies. Here's a goodie. Yeah! There's a baddie. I just shot myself on the stairs. Can you handle more complexity than that? And if you can't, don't watch this video, because you're going to hear stuff about military-industrial complex profits and lack of accountability that's going to make you question the reality you're presented by our rivals on the mainstream that certain platforms will support. That's why we need you dedicated to us. Let's get into it, shall we? Making his first trip outside Ukraine since Russia invaded, Volodymyr Zelensky, I did that like how Trudeau does it.
Hello, Volodymyr.
Vladimir, I love you. Oh, you're a proper leader in combat trousers. Oh, whenever I put makeup on my face, it is for wrong reasons, not for camo. Volodymyr Zelensky urged a joint session of Congress to continue support for the defense of his country. Let's have a look.
Against all odds, that's how Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky described his people's fight for freedom.
Look, the Ukrainian people are brave. Putin's invasion is wrong. The fact that children and adults and pets are being bombed in their homes is disgusting, deplorable. It should be stopped. But saying it's against the odds when America have spent more money on this war than Russia have is simply not true, is it?
The United States Congress welcomed Zelensky with a 2-minute standing ovation on the House floor.
To believe that this is not propaganda, you have to believe that those people in Congress who you know own stocks and shares in military-industrial complex companies, who you know regulate big tech platforms and appear to make money out of them, you have to believe that all that they're thinking in that moment is, this is good, that Ukraine is standing up for Russia, we're against tyranny. Okay, how do you feel about comparable tyranny, for example, in Yemen and Saudi Arabia's ongoing bombing? Oh no. I've forgotten how to clap, right? Because either wars are wrong or they're not wrong. Either tyranny is bad or it's not bad. So this is not an attack on Ukraine. It's not like I don't support Ukrainian people. Of course I do. I don't think there should be a war. I think it's disgraceful that a peace treaty was nearly reached and then Boris Johnson, Prime Minister of our country, the UK, at the time, went and some say dissuaded Zelensky from signing it. We're not criticising Ukraine. We're not criticising Zelensky. We're criticising the corruption that I believe is at play here and the mainstream media's bias supporting. Do you agree with us on this? Let us know in the chat. Let us know in the comments.
We expected to hear what President Biden had to say, is that he's proud of the Ukrainian president, that America stands by him, that he will continue to send aid his way to help him fight the Russians.
He certainly will be sending aid. $45 billion, an increase of $7 billion on what was originally agreed. And it's very difficult, in my mind at least, to separate an unaccountable Pentagon. We'll tell you more about that in a minute. A profiteering military-industrial complex that takes often 50% of defence budgets for private companies like Raytheon and Lockheed Martin from what looks like an attempt to reduce the complexity of a potentially terrifying and already injurious and awful conflict. That's all we're saying. And if saying something that seems as sanguine, reflective, and plainly true as that becomes censored and unsayable, that doesn't make me think, oh wow, these people are so certain in the truth that they are annihilating any potential opposition. I think we've experienced stuff like that before, that kind of censorship, and we call it tyranny.
Against all odds and doom and gloom scenarios, Ukraine didn't fall. Ukraine is alive and kicking. When I was in Bakhmut yesterday, our heroes gave me the flag, the battle flag.
I mean, look, there are some symbols at play, and there's obviously real emotion. It is a real war. People are really dying. People are really fighting. That's not untrue. That's happening. Just talking about the simplification, the reductivism, the sort of the odd shot that we're looking at, the gavel and the sort of chopping board that's behind his head, the evocation of the flag and patriotism, which increasingly, I think, are symbols that are drawn to the forefront of your mind as a kind of a veil. You place the flag over things you don't want looked at more closely.
They asked me to bring this flag to you, to the U.S. Congress, to members of the House of Representatives and senators whose decisions can save millions of people.
I'd like to believe that the truth is as simple as that. That's what I'd like to believe. It would relax me to just think, oh wow, yeah, what this is Russia are really bad and Putin is awful and they've invaded Ukraine and now America are bravely and boldly supporting this heroic leader. And that's great. That's what I'd like to believe, but I just keep seeing information that contradicts it. And also, do you remember Iraq? Do you remember Afghanistan? Do you remember Vietnam? It doesn't mean that Ukrainian people are not heroic. Plainly they are. It doesn't mean that this isn't a terrible war and that people are like doing their best and fighting for their lives and fighting for survival, and that ought to be supported. What I'm suggesting is the reductivism, the simplification, the amplification of one side of the story and the negation of the other is insulting. And the reason it's happening is not just so we can do what's best, it's to make money. It's to make money.
We stand, we fight, and we will win because we are united. Ukraine, America, and the entire free world.
Nancy Pelosi there, she wouldn't be involved in anything nefarious or any profiteering or misguiding people or creating simplified narratives. She's just taking that flag for the children.
For the children.
Oh, Nancy, that's not a good look. Oh, kiss me, baby. If when you're watching that, you feel sort of like pleased and stuff, you've become co-opted by the establishment. That doesn't mean few Ukrainian children are being saved. That means few Lockheed Martin and Raytheon are going to make some money. If you think that those people care more about Ukrainian humanitarian aid than profiteering, then why don't they own stocks and shares in fucking companies that help children? Okay, so let's have a look at some facts. According to reports, House and Senate lawmakers have agreed to an omnibus package, a massive spending bill that includes about $45 billion in new Ukraine aid. That's $8 billion more than what President Biden was reportedly asking for to finish out the year. If it passes, that will mean US assistance to Ukraine in its war against Russia will top out at more than $100 billion for the year. To put this in context, Russia's projected defense budget for 2023 is $84 billion. America, a country who are not in this war, are spending more money on this war than Russia, who are in this war. Okay. The US is also expected to send misleadingly named precision bomb kits to Ukraine as Russia's assault nears its second year with no end in sight. Moscow is deeming the planned shipment as a provocation, warning of unpredictable consequences. So while America claim this is not a proxy war, they've spent more money on it than Russia have, and they are sending actual machines of death to Ukraine. Now again, this is not to say that the Ukrainian people are not worthy of defence and that they're not brave. Both of those things are true. They are brave and they should be defended. However, wouldn't you feel a lot better, tell me in the chat, tell me in the comments, if there was a sort of a reliable statement like this? Because we believe in this conflict so much, this is what we're going to do. We're not going to have Raytheon, Lockheed Martin or any of our military-industrial complex partners who's millions every year lobbying. They're not going to make any profits from this. We've agreed to deal with them. They've decided they believe in it so much that they're just going to do all this stuff at cost. We don't want money. We're going to extract that from it. And we're going to be really accountable for the money that we spend. And we're going to ensure that we handle this in the most diplomatic way possible. And we're going to take responsibility for NATO's actions and reneging on pledges made to Gorbachev when the wall came down. That's what it would sound like. It would sound like that. It wouldn't sound like brave Ukrainian, Russia, tyrant. That's an attempt to stop you thinking properly. reality. And it's not just this story. You can use this analytical system for any story. Look at the pandemic at the beginning. This is a unique disaster. We need to do this. Big pharma. We're not going to make any money. It'll be disgusting. Oh, wow, we had our most profitable year. Just tell me this. Is there any documentation anywhere of Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, or Raytheon saying things like, shareholders, we're going to have a couple of good years because this Ukrainian conflict looks like it's going on. See if you can find it. Find it for yourself. You don't need to rely on me. I don't think I'm some superhuman with unique insight. I'm just like you. I'm just trying to work this stuff out. I'm trying to work out how this is operating. Let me know what you think in the chat and in the comments. Meanwhile, Washington's dangerous and short-sighted policies put the United States and Russia on the verge of a direct clash, Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said on Monday. For its part, Moscow urges the Joe Biden administration to soberly assess the situation and not to unleash a spiral of dangerous escalation, Maria Zakharova pointed out. I think I would prefer the sober assessment, but I think dangerous spiral might be more profitable. As well as Zelensky's high-profile, beautifully staged and to some degree legitimate visit to Washington, a new bill is being passed that I think you should look at more closely. In an effort to expedite aid to Ukraine, that's what we're trying to do, we're just trying to aid Ukraine, lawmakers are relinquishing accountability measures to grant the Pentagon what have been characterised as wartime procurement powers. These emergency authorities enable the Pentagon to deliver Ukraine more weapons faster. So do you see how they make the argument? I mean, look at what's happening in Ukraine, it's so terrible. Yeah, it is terrible. Children shouldn't be killed. Good. So they need weapons to defend themselves. Yeah, oh God, yeah, it looks like it. And you want them to have those weapons slowly or quickly? Quickly? Good. We're going to need to pass this wartime procurement measure. Ultimately, what they're leading you to is the conclusion. If at the end of this, the military-industrial complex makes loads of money, that was at least part of the point. Or was it a byproduct? There is also legislation pending in Congress that indicates that the US government believes the Ukraine war may continue for years. On October the 11th, the Senate Armed Services Committee submitted its amended draft of the National Defense Authorization Act for 2023. Nestled within the draft is a provision that would establish an emergency multi-year plan to award massive defense contracts to Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, BAE Systems and other war corporations to produce weapons for Ukraine and to replenish US stockpiles as well as those of foreign allies and partners. Even if you extract the idea of evil, malfeasance and profiteering and just say what we have here are systems that just unconsciously pursue certain measures and processes, then it's clear what happens is we have these organisations have power, it's better for these organisations if there is a requirement for their product, they create the conditions that require their product. You don't need like robes, owls, madness, people get their throats slit and bonfires. You don't need any of that. Just go, do these businesses require wars? Yes, there you go. At least 20 federal lawmakers, those guys applauding, or their spouses or dependent children hold stock in Raytheon Technologies and Lockheed Martin, which manufacture the weapons Western allies are sending to Ukraine to fight Russian invaders. Now listen, I know this is the sort of thing people will say, oh, he's naive, he's wearing that hat. But just you tell me, would it be fairer and better if people in Congress couldn't own stocks and shares in Lockheed Martin and Raytheon? Why is that not a law? Why? Is it better for you in some way? Oh, it must be better for you in some way that I just can't think of. Even though I drag my brain out of my skull and pound it into a mush and pick through every synapse, I cannot find a reason that it's beneficial to you. But, like, straight away, I can think of one why it's beneficial for them. But it can't be that. It can't be that, because everything's so simple, isn't it? So straight away, ban that. Straight away, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, you can't have weapons manufacturers profiteering. Otherwise, you create a world in which war is favourable to the most powerful interests in the world. That can't be improved on. And if you suggest improving it, you're a fascist and you don't stand with Ukraine and you're a conspiracy theorist. Could be that, or it could be you're not a fucking idiot. At least 15 of those, both Democrats and Republicans, but hold powerful positions on committees that control US military policy. Wow, what a weird coincidence. Both Democrats and Republicans that hold positions on regulatory military committees own stocks and shares in companies that make weapons. That's really weird. If only there was a way to stop that, but I just can't think of, like, banning it or making it illegal or setting up systems of government that are accountable to the people that none of that would work. That wouldn't work. That's a conspiracy theory. Elsewhere in this war that America are not involved in, they're training troops to be in this war. Starting in January, 500 Ukrainian troops a month will travel to Germany to train with the US Army, who are not involved in this war. The Pentagon, who do not have to account to anybody, announced on Thursday, which is a day of the week that doesn't even really exist. The training will be focused on battalion-level operations, said Air Force Brigadier General Pat Ryder, a Pentagon spokesman, during a press briefing. On March the 11th, President Biden reassured the American public and the world that the United States and its NATO allies allies were not at war with Russia. We will not fight a war with Russia in Ukraine, said Biden. Direct conflict between NATO and Russia is World War III, something we must strive to prevent. Some of the ways that we're striving is by training troops, giving equipment, giving massive aid, and disrupting the process of diplomacy and peace talks. You're doing a great job over there. But don't take my word for it. Let's see Joe Biden say it in case we've all just gone mental or something.
Let me say it again. Our forces are not and will not be engaged in the conflict with Russia in Ukraine.
Good, good. By Ukraine, near Ukraine, not our troops trained by us, using weapons we sold to them at a profit, 50% of which went to military-industrial complex companies, 70% of which can't be tracked inside of Ukraine. That we might do.
We will not fight a war against Russia in Ukraine. Direct confrontation between NATO and Russia is World War III. Something we must strive to prevent.
Unless, of course, it were to become very profitable and we already have the bunkers, then we probably would do it. Now, we don't need to enter into the world of weird conjecture or conspiratorial pirouettes because plainly you can see what's happening financially. You can see how the media is presenting this story. You can see what interests are represented within Congress. You can see where your money is going. And because it's your money, they have to have you believe that this is uncomplicated and simple and straightforward. Because otherwise, in a democracy, you might go, hey, I'm not sure that's the best thing to do with my money if it might lead to World War III. Couldn't we come to a diplomatic solution? Is there a way of protecting these children and families that you care so much about that doesn't actually escalate the conflict, leading to more weapon sales, which I know is not part of this and you don't care about that? Could there be a diplomatic solution that we could focus on? Have we got the right people involved? Are we doing everything? Are we including all the information we possibly could? If you're confident that that's the situation, then I guess me and you just see the world differently. But I know that we share a vision. I know that you believe, and I certainly believe, we can create a different world. That's what makes this so frustrating. This is not the best we can do. The values they claim to have, caring about people, stopping war, allowing people to express themselves freely, allowing freedom and truth to thrive, those are the real values. They're using the real values to lie to you. They're hiding bad motives behind good ones. And that's what's driving me crazy. Not totally crazy, though. I'm staying on the line. I'm staying sane. I'm staying free. And I want you to stay free with me. If you enjoyed this video, have a
All right. Thank you, Russell. Thank you all for putting up with that. Yeah, I mean, he might be one to be wary of. Why is he not shadow banned? Why is he allowed such a platform? I appreciate a lot of what he has to say. That striving to prevent World War III, I mean, that sounds all good, Joe, but looks a lot like driving towards World War III. I mean, we've been through what happened with the coup, the Maidan coup, the State Department involvement. Old Vicky Newland, what did she have to say?
Fuck the EU.
And it's pretty grim. And my heart goes out to the Ukrainian people, to the Russian people, to the American people. What can we say? Echoing Smedley Butler, quoting Smedley Butler, war is a racket. Seems like it always has been. Speaking of which, I did talk a bit last week about my great grandfather's books. I've got two of them here. Fighting the Flying Circus. This is the biography of Eddie Rickenbacker, the first World War I ace on the American side. I've been reading this on Secret Air Service. I'm not really going to get into it tonight, but it's a work of fiction, and it's pretty fascinating. It's detailing a lot of Black Ops stuff, I'd say, from the World War I era at the beginning of the aviation age. So there'll be more about that later. I'm trying to kind of come to grips with, Driggs, Lawrence Latourette Driggs, the first is my great grandfather, and I'm trying to suss out, was he a propagandist? I don't think so necessarily. He was a political opponent to Woodrow Wilson, which kept him from serving in an Army Air Corps, which he wanted to develop. Of course, he was older. He didn't learn to fly till he was 37 in 1913. But trying to learn as much as I can, because in the family, there really wasn't a lot passed down aside from the books. And I'm finally having an appreciation of what he did, who he was involved with. So that's something I'm reading. But to propagandist. Well, yeah, propaganda. Yeah, we'll see. I need to rig up my camera so I can do a better job of showing it. Do a little book cam kind of thing. I did it on the fly last week, but yeah, that's something I want to delve into. DEF CON radio in the background. Shout out to Soma FM for the bed music. The ambiance. Yeah, but I'm interested in what my great grandfather was up to. He had some interesting friends, it seems, and a lot of knowledge of inside baseball, World War I, which obviously was a devastating conflict. The dawning of a new era of just meat grinder, dehumanizing warfare. So, sticking with the Ukraine business, I came across something Max Blumenthal tweeted out, and I wanted to show this short clip and then play some of the longer episode that this came from. I haven't checked it out myself, but I am familiar with one of the guys in here. He doesn't speak in this clip. We'll probably hear him speak in the full clip, the full show. He's a former Army Ranger, a journalist, author named Jack Murphy. No, not that guy, not John Goldman, the real Jack Murphy. But he and another fellow on the Team House podcast sat down with Andrew Milburn of the Mozart Group, which is a private military contractor, which apparently is involved in heavy conflict, has been, with a Russian private military contractor named the Wagner Group. So we're going to hear briefly from Andrew Milburn about Ukraine and some of his candid thoughts after a few double shots of whiskey. So let's check this out.
It's a corrupt, fucked up society. So I'm not a big fan of Ukraine. Oh, what is that?
This is Buffalo Trace.
Okay. And the Ukrainians are in violation of the Hague Convention. There is a, I forget the exact phraseology, but it is, we looked at this closely, and it's there should be no filming of the phrase, the terminology is bringing attention, blah 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 blah, to media, and yes, the Ukrainians are violating that. Absolutely. They're filming of a number of things that they're doing with POWs is violating law of armed conflict, and you can't, guys.
Right.
Killing the Russian prisoners is
right, and it's interesting because in the past, in you like Latin America or whatever, if U.S. forces or employees were involved with any force that committed, war atrocities or whatever,
right?
you have to, you're done.
Yeah.
But we're obviously not going to pull our support from Ukraine at this point.
Well, I mean,
these violations.
It's atrocities. No,
Yeah.
I mean, it still is. I mean, you shouldn't kill dudes who, everyone knows who surrendered. I mean, and there was plenty of that. But my point is, it's not about Ukraine. We're not like, I happen to have, Ukraine flag tied to my bag, but I'm not, oh my God, Ukraine's so awesome. No, because I understand that there are plenty fucked up people running Ukraine. It's not about that. It's about global norms, right?
Right.
Global norms.
It's about Putin. It's like allowing dudes in the 21st century like Putin to do what they want to do.
It's a just fight.
Yeah.
It's a just fight. Well, that guy's presumably making money off of this fight. I just thought this was interesting. I pulled up the Wagner Group Wikipedia page. Wagner Group, PMC, private military company. It is, described here as a de facto private army of Russian President Vladimir Putin. It is owned, the group is widely believed to be owned or financed by Yevgeny Prigozhin, a businessman with close links to Putin. So apparently he's denied that for a long time. Admitted so in September 2022 that he founded the group. And of course, the Wikipedia page states, while the Wagner Group is not ideologically driven, various elements of said Wagner Group have been linked to neo-Nazis and far-right extremists. Well, that sounds interesting. And that seems to be citing other Wikipedia entries. No, excuse me. Undermining democracy and exploiting clients, the Wagner Group's nefarious activities in Africa. Moscow turns U.S. volunteers into new bogeyman in Ukraine. One of the worst ways Putin is gaslighting the world on Ukraine. So obviously, there's some conflicting information with what we know about the Azov Battalion, some of the ideology involved with the groups in Ukraine. But back to Mozart Group and Andrew Milburn. Let's check out some of the Team House podcast. As I said, I'm familiar with Jack Murphy. I'm not sure who the other guy is. Maybe we'll find out, but I respect the guy. Used to listen to him on something called the Soft Rep Radio. And I think the Team House is kind of a spin-off or related group. So let's have a listen to the Team House podcast from November 8th of 2022.
Special operations, covert ops, espionage. The Team House with your hosts, Jack Murphy and David Park.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 174 of the Team House. A little off-kilter Tuesday episode. Of course, we'll be back on Friday, but tonight we're here with our guest, Andrew Milburn. He's here for, I believe, the third episode.
Indeed,
your third appearance. We really appreciate it, man. You're kind of bouncing in between here and Europe. You've been really, since the last, I was remarking before we started, your last appearance on the show, like 6 months ago or whatever it was, me and you were like joking, like, oh, Russia would never invade Ukraine. That would never happen. Well, yeah, we were pretty wrong on that one. And you got directly involved, went over there and started the Mozart Group. And I mean, before we'll get like pretty in depth, but I mean, do you want to just start right off the bat telling people what the Mozart Group is? And what you're doing
yeah,
there?
Absolutely. And by the way, very fond memories of that last episode. I've tried to have it removed from the internet. Turns out you cannot do that.
No,
it's just firmly embedded.
The internet is permanent.
And I said maybe the last half an hour, but no. Yeah. But there you go. Anyway, good. Thank you.
We contacted the chief of the internet for you, and he said no.
The internet police?
Yeah. But anyway, I've been eclipsed by then by other equally drunken behavior on your episode that encourages drunken behavior.
That and the press calling you a mercenary occasionally.
Exactly, I know. And not just the press, but the Atlantic. No, I mean, serious, Jack, that is pretty egregious.
The establishment.
Well,
the Anglo-American establishment.
It's not so much the establishment. It's the fact that the Atlantic, New York Times, you can say what you will about their politics or their slant, but they make a thing that's justified about checking and fact-checking and double-checking, and they've been, and the Washington Post, by the way, too, have been pretty good about firing people when, it turns out that there's been things that are unethical, right, or it's just negligent. So I was disappointed that I know I'm answering your question, but I'm disappointed that the Atlantic, Graham Wood, who is supposed to be a renowned, credible journalist, wrote an article calling me a foreign fighter, which was absolutely inaccurate.
You and Malcolm Nance, he lumped you guys together, said you were mercenaries, right?
Yeah, was it Malcolm Nance? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
sorry
there you
about
go.
that.
Yeah. No, I mean, no.
Well,
I'm delighted to be lumped up with Malcolm. I wish I had his following, but I don't. So, yeah, essentially mercenaries, which is
mad dog killers.
So to your, sorry, getting back to your point. So, Jack, we convened here last time in January.
All right, real quick, I want to comment. Yeah, B1, you made a good point. If we know about it, how much of a private military company is this? And he's been on this show 3 times and he's joking about it. Can't disappear from the internet. Well, that's interesting. If that was something you should be worried about. I don't know. What does that say about this guy's credentials, his street smarts? I don't know. That's a good question. And then I found it interesting, Jack Murphy kind of tongue-in-cheek talking about the Anglo-American establishment coming from the Atlantic, describing this guy as a mercenary. Well, is that not what he is? Help me understand that. And I respect Jack Murphy. He's interesting because amongst the kind of special operation veteran journalists, he's definitely not like right of center. He's, I guess he's hard to pin down, but that's interesting hearing him kind of sarcastically talking about the Anglo-American establishment.
We became unutterably drunk. We lost you when you made a bathroom break. And unfortunately, the only thing people remember was when we were comparing tattoos at the end and I took off my shirt. I asked you to remove that. My lawyers contacted you. Unfortunately, you figured out that I can't afford lawyers, so that came out. Yeah.
Actually, we received very sizable donations to keep the episode up. Apparently, there are a number of people out there that enjoy the eye candy quite a bit.
Release the Murphy cut.
Yeah, the Murphy cut, yeah. Okay. All right. So anyway, but your the one thing I love about your show, it's modulated. So intellectually, modulated intellectually, it goes very rapidly up and down. So Jack. So soon after we had that episode. That sounds strange.
World War III pops off.
Sure enough, the Russians invade Kiev, and I, like probably many others, thought it was foregone conclusion that Ukraine would fall. Blah blah blah. I go out there. I write my 4 obligatory articles for Task and Purpose, and I want to issue an official apology to the then editor Paul Sroda, to whom I was very rude because I got a form letter from Task and Purpose saying, since you are now
a mercenary.
It used terms along those lines, yeah. I don't think it says
soldier of fortune.
Soldier of fortune.
Yeah.
Killer for hire.
Yeah.
We cannot ethically be associated with you anymore. And poor Paul, I was upset with him because I felt I'm so naive and emotional. Hey, you shouldn't have written me a form letter. You should have called me. But Paul's a great human being, good journalist, and he brought me out there. Anyway, fast forward, right? So we're in Kiev, and if you remember at the time, this was early March, and the Russians, no kidding, are on 3 sides of Kiev. It's so hard to imagine now. It seems surreal. But in Kiev itself, 20% of the population was left behind, and everyone was preparing to defend the city. And so, you read about, and it was true, in the West media that Zelensky said, everyone who wants an AK-47, come and draw one. If you're between the age of 18 and 65, they're sort of handing out all these weapons to guys who never handled a weapon before, right? Ammo, grenades. I'm not kidding you. It was surreal. And then some of the military guys there in Kiev, middle-ranking, most soft guys, there's 3 or 4 guys, said, okay, we got to train. Even if it's 3 or 4 days, because the Russians are approaching, they're on a time. It was a very tight time schedule. But we got to get them some training, right? And that's where they reached out to me. And I brought in short order, like 2 or 3 other guys, former Marines, MATIC guys from the States. We had a handful of guys in Ukraine, foreigners volunteering to help. We had very little time to kind of vet them. We didn't really vet them to begin with. We were lucky. We got some very good quality guys.
You vet the guys who were doing the training, or
yeah.
That's a crapshoot, isn't it?
We had no time for leahy vetting of the dudes who were about to fight the Russians. So we broke them up into 120-man increments, 5 days training. We'd finish training, and they would jump in their cars and they'd drive to the front. I'm not exaggerating. Irpin and Bucha, and then they would come back a few days later for refresher training. We'd pull them into classes to talk about what they'd learned in that time. And you got incredible stories from these guys. And there was no bravado. These were guys who'd been mostly students, and now they're like...
shell-shocked.
Yeah, and they're like, holy shit. Yeah, you've got to get very close to the Russians. Remember the Vietnamese, you say, they like, hold on, get in, hold close, and then they can't...
classic guerrilla tactic,
yeah,
like getting close.
And so the Ukrainians learn this too. You got to get in. Once you get in close with their infantry, they're shit. Mm-hmm. But if you're in range with their mortars or their artillery, they're really fucking good, and it's devastating. You've just got to... You got to get in there. And there's one kid, he's like, I never worked out how to shoot the AK-47. It's very confusing to me. So my lieutenant goes, here's a bag of grenades. Just, you work it like that. You pull the pin and just throw the grenade. And he's like...
But stand over there when you do it.
He was like, and it was so awesome. These things are easy. I mean, I swear to God, these are real conversations. And he's like, I can be the grenade thrower forever. And we're like, no, well, dude, hopefully the Russians aren't always going to be that close.
Right. So did you finally get him sorted on the AK?
Yeah. He, a lot of these guys have carried weapons. Very few of them have fired them, and the weapons manipulation is horrific. And so, fast forward, that was the Battle of Kiev. And I'm not saying we had an influence on the Battle of Kiev, but we did our best, and we probably saved lives, Ukrainian lives, and hopefully contributed to Russian deaths. But it was it's a short order process, and it was. You couldn't make this shit up. I mean, we would go to a range because you have to. I suppose it's some kind of a Marine Corps ethos, right? Because I know Army basic, they don't shoot their weapons. Basic. What? Come on, man. Don't get defensive.
You come all this way to
all
talk
right,
shit?
No. Anyway, I'm totally conflating things. When I'm talking about special operations components, Marine special operations, MATIC is the only component that during their selection. You're rated on marksmanship. Okay, listen, we can give the Marines one thing here, right, David? That is a religious observance of.
Oh, there are many rifles.
Yeah,
this is my rifle. There are many. And every that's the Marine Corps. Every Marine is a rifleman, and you spend your entire boot camp snapping in.
Yeah,
and
But what comes with that is a genuine feeling,
right,
among the Quds bakers and candlestick makers that they are. Riflemen, because at least once a year they go, infantrymen can disparage that, but bottom line is every Marine knows how to shoot, right? So that's kind of the ethos, because along with that comes confidence and everything else.
Right.
So 5 days, what do you do? Well, they've got to be medically proficient in the sense they've got to know how to bring themselves back as best they can.
I don't want to fast forward
from, from for the
A little
edge
bit.
and
Let them get into whiskey.
CCP. They've got that the Ukrainians actually are undermining their own cause with their terrific propaganda. So their information operations campaign was very effective at the strategic level. It's not at a tactical level. It's shitty. They could take so much more advantage of Russian morale by inducing surrenders. They don't do that. They don't do that. In fact, their mantra of hatred towards Russians is not helping them. They should reach out to the Russian soldiers, say, "You want Ukrainian citizenship? You get your own fucking computer and an apartment in Odessa and." Whatever.
A washing machine.
Washing machine, yeah. I know.
Washing machine.
Yeah,
I'll take them up on that.
You can see the videos of them, washing machines being loaded in tanks,
Stealing like the kids' Disney sheets and shit like this, but I mean, all of that said, I mean, the Ukrainians, inch by inch, are retaking territory, and I mean, some pretty stunning successes over the last, month and a half or so.
Yeah, I mean, I would be cautious, though, Jack, about calling them stunning successes. So
they were unexpected from at least for me.
No, 100%. So, but I'm agreeing with you. They were. I'm not undermining the success that happened. I'm just saying that you have to look forward to what did they lead to, and that's my concern. So. So let's look at the north, all right? The Kharkiv breakthrough, 6,000 square miles is what the Ukrainians claim. Could well be. It's significant. But, and it was well done. It was a result of initiative at brigade level. So 3 brigades broke through. They saw, the Russians were on the ropes. Russians were even signaling it. They raised a fucking white flag by Izium train station. So it didn't take intelligence analysts to say, okay, I think, guys, I see a gap, and they are bailing out along the roads, and so the Ukrainians moved in. And there was a lot preceding that, with HIMARS strikes and all that. But the Ukrainians moved forward, but they instantly were out of gas. I mean, not out of gas, literally. They didn't have the resources to exploit that. 3 brigades moved forward, and once they got through Izium, they took Lyman. They dug in because they couldn't exploit any. And that sadly is, I think, what we're going to see on the Ukrainian side is you're going to see individual small unit actions, seizing initiative, taking ground, but it's going to be very small, and there's no means to exploit it because the Ukrainians don't have that. On the Russian side, I get it. There's been that good news, but the good news is kind of over, right? In Kherson, by the way, Kherson counteroffensive kicked off early September. It was October by the time
we need more whiskey.
media started reporting, they're making gains. 10, 20. I've met 4 or 5 guys since then who are on the same street at the same time, and our memories are all slightly different.
Yeah.
And the cool thing, though, when I wrote about the experience in the book, the guys who chimed in were like, hey, for the most part, I remember that. And, but every one of them, none of them said, hey, no, this is what happened.
Wrong,
Everyone was like, oh, wow. Hey, that was a really, I accept that I was so scared at the time that I probably got, but this is what I remember.
Yeah. I remember those things like that coming out in hot washes, an ARRR is I moved this way and I shot the guy on the corner of this house. It's like, you weren't on that side of the house. It's like,
I mean, adrenaline does funny things to the mind, right? It really does.
I remember when I wrote the book, and there were portions of it that were about some of my teammates, and I showed it to them. Like, is this how you remember it? Like, what's your input? What do you think? And there were certain times where I had not like huge discrepancies, but I remember my guys saying things that they have no memory of.
Yeah.
They're like, I didn't say that. I don't remember.
Yeah.
And I don't think they're lying or anything like that. I think, like you said, the adrenaline's pumping really high. You're in an emotional moment.
You have to understand that you are capable too.
Absolutely, yeah.
Of
it's possible
that.
I got something off.
That's why that was one of my struggles in the book. There was another episode in there where I remember very clearly, obviously, I don't know, driving up to the Yala River and watching the bridge across the Yala River blow up in our faces. But the guy I am with, Jeff Eby, good friend of mine, is like, no, man, that didn't happen. It happened the next morning or whatever while we were asleep, and it's so strange. And he said,
let's get deeper.
Right now they're ambivalent. They are 100% sure of they're an ally. Crimea, yeah, go at it. Crimea is that's why they won that range, to really prep Crimea. So it's a game changer for them.
So let's say that we gave Ukraine everything they needed, and then 7 days from now, they push Russia back, the war's over. In your opinion, what becomes of Ukraine, and are they our friend? Are they our ally now?
Well, we've got a lot of work with Ukraine. So, first of all, we have to convince them that they're an ally. Right now, they're ambivalent. They are 100% sure of UK support because they understand what UK is giving them meets their requirements. You see what I'm saying? We've got to take an intelligent approach that actually will save us money, cause less resources, and convince the Ukrainians that we are truly an ally. But we have to. It's a minor risk. The risk is, what is the risk? Inciting Putin? Come on. But it means a more circumspect, focused approach. What do you need? Specifically, what do you need? What do you need to do to the Russians that we can help you with? Not simply, here's another 37.4 billion. It's the Norwegians providing the NASAMS anti-air defense system, and the Germans with the RSK, and the French with the Caesar self-propelled artillery. They are at least, we can criticize them all, but they're at least saying to the Ukrainians, what do you need, and answering that request. We, United States, are not. Well, you must need this. We've got all this shit here. I think you need this. Right. And the Ukrainians know. Really? And, honestly, though, I got to be honest, the Ukrainians, I'm like, what are you going to use all this shit for, the 113s? And they're telling me, well, right now we use our own personal vehicles to take guys to the front lines. So now at least we have a better, but why not give them something that's really fucking worthwhile?
Yeah. It's fascinating. And we appreciate it because for me, this is one of the first, it's the second firsthand account that we've had on the show, I think. Right. But it didn't go this much into depth.
It's the best. What he means is it's the best first-hand account from a guy whose approach is more sophisticated and debonair.
And cultured. Yeah, exactly. I mean,
checks out.
Yeah.
You're British, of course.
I know. I want to ask you the way to the restroom, but I remember last time we did that with Jack. He was gone for an hour.
I can help you.
I know. I don't want you to help.
No, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to get a little personal. I'm going to unplug your microphone for you.
No, actually, I don't need to go net.
Oh.
Jack isn't too adverse to it either.
Not as adverse as I used to be, especially on trips to Las Vegas.
No, but I think it's a very positive thing.
Yeah, I do too. It's not great for me. I don't get a whole bunch out of it, but I'm not opposed to it. There's, I think that it's a great thing to be legal.
Well, so you're a pot smoking hippie now after all those years in the Marines?
Yeah, 100%.
All right.
Your hair out.
That's enough of that. I think we got the juiciest part out of the clip that was on Twitter. I wish I had been able to check out all of that before this. And that was my edition. That wasn't on the show card. It gives me pause to even talk about this stuff. What the fuck do I know? I think there's a lot of information to sift through. Information overwhelm. It's kind of what we're always dealing with. We're trying to understand the world around us. And certainly there's the ominous continuity that Rich and Tony tend to highlight in the effort we put forth with Grand Theft World. And I'm trying to get up to speed to kind of have mastery over these subjects, mainly being a facilitator in getting that information out there. Tell me what you think. I saw some clips on Twitter. There's a lot of really spicy, ugly videos of the combat. It's just a fucking mess. That's interesting. That was from November. Obviously now Zelensky has come over and got himself a whole bunch more money. Looks like he was persuasive. All right, let's get out of that. Move on. Got a clip from Jimmy Dore. Shifting gears into the topic of Twitter and the FBI agents. Apparently, employed to monitor jokes on Twitter. So this should be interesting. Let's check out what Jimmy has to say.
Part 6 of the Twitter threads. Ready? Between January 2020 and November 2022, there were over 150 emails the FBI and former Twitter trust and safety chief Yoel Roth between them. We've showed you Yoel Roth before. Now he's afraid for his life. Some are mundane, like San Francisco agent Elvis Chan wishing Roth a happy new year, along with a reminder to attend one quarterly call next week. Others are requests for information into Twitter users related to active investigations. So that's more of their friendly relationship with the FBI and the higher ups at Twitter. But a surprisingly high number of requests by the FBI for Twitter to take action on election misinformation, even involving joke tweets from low follower accounts. This is kind of mind-blowing, that part. The FBI social media, I'll show you, we're going to show you it. The FBI social media focused task force, known as FTIF, or fuckheads, created in the wake of 2016 elections, swelled to 80. So they had 80 agents monitoring Twitter for jokes they didn't like. You think I'm kidding? That 80 FBI agents, they're getting dental so they can peruse fucking Twitter all day. That's what they're doing with your tax dollars.
Well, do you think they have to show like numbers of, because the low follower count, the ones I saw them, they censor them. Do you think they have to like, look, I got this many censored?
Yes, just like a cop writes parking tickets.
Yeah.
You mean like that?
Yeah,
you have a quota. Yeah.
But much less valuable than a cop doing that, yeah.
Federal intelligence and law enforcement reach into Twitter. Their reach into Twitter included the Department of Homeland Security, which partnered with security contractors and think tanks to pressure Twitter to moderate content. It's no secret that government analyzes bulk data for all sorts of purposes, everything from tracking terror suspects to making economic forecasts. The Twitter files show something new. Agencies like the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security regularly sending social media content to Twitter through multiple entry points pre-flagged for moderation. So all that means is the FBI was on the regular sending shit to Twitter and saying, take this down, censor this. And who did the work? The FBI did the work, and we're giving you an order. Go ahead.
It's not censorship if it's not the government. It was the government. It's been the government the whole time.
It's been the government. What stands out is the sheer quantity of reports from the government. Some are aggregated from public hotlines. So here it says, Election Day protocol for FBI headquarters is to stand up a national election command post, which provides a centralized location for assessing election-related threats. Status reports and complaints are tracked. Have a tip, send it in. So what stands out is the sheer quantity of reports from the government. Some are aggregated from public hotlines. So they would just you could call them, you could call the FBI's hotline, and the FBI would call Twitter and say, fucking take down this thing.
See something, censor something.
An unanswered question, do agencies like the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security do in-house flagging work themselves, or do they farm it all out? You have to prove to me that inside the effing government, you can do any kind of massive data or AI search, says one former intelligence officer. Hello, Twitter contacts. The master canine quality of the FBI's relationship with Twitter comes through. So he's calling it like a dog and its master. That Twitter was like the dog and the FBI is the master. It comes through in this November 2022 email in which the FBI San Francisco is notifying you it wants action on 4 accounts. That's from Fred, FBI San Francisco. It says, FBI San Francisco is notifying you of the below accounts, which may potentially constitute violations of Twitter's terms of service for any action or inaction deemed appropriate within Twitter policy. And then they give you the 4 accounts. This is what the FBI is doing all day. Twitter personnel in that case went on to look for reasons to suspend all 4 of those accounts. So FBI says to suspend these accounts, and then the people at Twitter go, let's find a reason to suspend them. The FBI wants them suspended. And they do. And they, from one of the accounts, was of someone called @Froma, and all those the tweets were jokes. You want to see the... I want to remind Republicans to vote tomorrow, Wednesday, November 9th. That's obviously a joke. That's the kind of stuff.
Look at the engagement of it. 25 likes, 3 retweets.
This is the kind of stuff that the FBI would flag. Just to show the FBI can be hyper intrusive in both directions, they also asked Twitter to review a blue-leaning account for a different joke. Except here it was even more obvious that Claire Foster, PhD, who kids a lot, was kidding. You want to see it? Here it is. So here's the thing that says, take this tweet down by this lady. And then here's Dr. Foster. I'm a ballot counter in my state. If you're not wearing a mask, I'm not counting your vote. Safety first. For every negative comment on this post, I'm adding another vote for the Democrats. Those are obvious jokes.
You know, the first one was not an obvious joke to me because people are that crazy on there that they...
I would agree with you.
Would say that. The second one, I see it's a joke now.
Yeah.
The first one's like not a great... It's just like a lie. It's not really a great joke.
But look at the engagement, right? Okay. Matt Taibbi says, anyone who cannot discern obvious satire from reality has no place making decisions for others or working for the feds, said Claire Foster, PhD, when told about the flagging.
Or maybe they have no business flagging jokes.
Yes.
How about feds shouldn't their sense of humor should not be the...
Yeah, you shouldn't have to pass a litmus test if you have a sense of humor to go censor somebody's joke. How about no censoring?
How about the government's not... I thought isn't allowed to do that, and that's what you all harped on.
That's what I thought. Of the 6 accounts mentioned in the previous 2 emails, all but 2 were suspended. In an internal email from November 5th, 2022, the FBI's National Election Command Post, which compiles and sends on complaints, sent the San Francisco field office a long list of accounts that they may warrant additional action. Look at all these freaking accounts they sent. By the way, number 20 on the list? What is number 20? Number 20? Billy Baldwin.
What did Billy Baldwin say?
What did he say?
Something about Jesus.
Something about Jesus and abortion. So here it is. Here's all of them, and hear them say, hey, we want you to take these down. Agent Chan passed the list on to his Twitter folks. So it says, hang on. It says, please see below the list of Twitter accounts which we believe are violating your terms of service by disseminating false information about time, place, or manner of upcoming elections. Let us know if you decide to take any actions against these accounts based on our tipper to you. Also, let us know if we need to issue a preservation letter, as we intend to serve legal process for these accounts. What in the F?
Well, he included his pronouns. That's pretty cool.
Did he?
Yes.
Oh my God.
They should have put him first. That's the only exception I would take to it, but...
So he says, Twitter then replied with its list of actions taken. Note, mercy shown to actor Billy Baldwin, because he's not on the list again. So it's like he somehow got left off that list. Many of the above accounts were satirical in nature, nearly all, with the exception of Baldwin and the RSB network, were relatively low engagement, and some were suspended, most with a generic thanks Twitter letter. Okay. When told of the FBI flagging, Lex Atola replied, my thoughts initially include one, seems like prima facie. What does that mean? A prima facie First Amendment violation. What does prima facie mean? Holy cow, me, an account with that reach of an amoeba. What else are they looking at? So that's what this guy thought. Like, they're looking at me? I have no reach. I can't believe the FBI is policing jokes on Twitter. That's crazy, said Tiberius. A letter, is that my nephew? Tiberius 444? It wasn't that his handle? That can't be. It can't be.
Prima facie is a Latin expression meaning at first sight or based on first impression.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Facie?
No, it's prima facie. That you think it's
I don't
Fauci?
know. I say Prima Fauci.
Fauci.
It's Prima Fonzie, I call it.
You think it's Prima Fauci?
As if I'm looking at the way that's pronounced
On
right
its
there.
face.
Can you see it?
Come on, Jimmy.
Is that
Prima facie? See the
Facie?
E? You see the A at the end? That E on with the thing on the top of it? How do you pronounce that?
That's a E.
It's like a long E?
Uh-huh.
Oh, really? I'm gonna get.
Why don't you just have her say it to you?
Hey Siri, how do you pronounce prima facie? Oh, there's a video. I don't know why Siri didn't talk to me.
Pronounce this Latin expression, meaning on its first encounter or at first sight. The literal translation would be at first face or at first appearance. We are looking at how to pronounce in English or American. This is normally pronounced prima facie.
Prima facie?
Prima facie. I watch Boston Legal. Not Fauci. It's prima facie. I was right. Thank you. Thank you. No one congratulating me for being right. They still think I'm wrong. That's the problem here. They still think I have it mispronounced.
We don't. We're really proud
In
of
a
the
letter,
pronunciation
in
that
a
you
letter,
provided.
in a letter to former Deputy General Counsel and former top FBI lawyer Jim Baker on September 6, 2022. These are recent. Legal executive Stasia Cardill outlines results from her soon-to-be weekly meeting with the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Justice, the FBI, and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. What in the fuck is going on at Twitter?
You know, Jimmy, prima facie, I think all those departments should have their fucking funding cut.
I hope they do. The Twitter executive writes she explicitly asked if there were impediments to the sharing of classified information with industry. The answer? FBI was adamant no impediments to sharing existed. This passage underscores the unique one big happy family vibe between Twitter and the FBI. With what other firm would the FBI blithely agree to no impediments to classified information? Holy shit! At the bottom of that letter, she lists a series of escalations apparently raised at the meeting, which were already handled. About one, she writes, flagged a specific tweet on Illinois use of modems to transmit election results in possible violations of the civic integrity policy. Another internal letter from January 2021 shows Twitter executives processing an FBI list of possible violative content tweets. There it is. Okay. Here, too, most tweets contained the same "get out there and vote Wednesday" trope that had low engagement. This is what the FBI spends its time on. So it's another one of these... Get out and vote on Wednesday. So that's another
Maybe
one.
they just hate hack jokes.
Maybe they don't like hack jokes at the FBI.
Maybe, all right.
In this March 2021 email, an FBI liaison thanks a senior Twitter executive. You know how hard it is for me not to say FBI lesbian? Every time I read the word liaison. An FBI liaison thanks a senior Twitter executive for the chance to speak to you and the team, then delivers a packet of products.
Products are what? People to be censored?
Yes.
Great.
The executive circulates the products, which are really Department of Homeland Security bulletins stressing the need for greater collaboration between law enforcement and private sector partners. And there it is. There it is. It says, please see the products the FBI Office of Public Sector just provided to us. Please feel free to share these with your teams. Russian malign influence, use of permissive... So this all garbage. The ubiquity of the 2016 Russian interference story as stated pretext for building out the censorship machine can't be overstated. So what he's saying is they were using the idea that Russia hacked our election to do all this censoring. He said that can't be overstated. Russia didn't hack our election. That didn't happen.
We'll see how he said it's analogous to how 9/11 inspired the expansion of the security state. I guess it's not because 9/11 did happen.
Yeah, 9/11
the
happened.
Russian thing did not happen. Yeah.
Right. But they used 9/11 to bring in a security state and a surveillance state, which we now live under. You know, the government collects every one of your texts, emails, and telephone calls. Your telephone calls. They've got them. Okay.
Well, luckily, they've got me trained to give all that stuff away of my own accord every chance I can.
That's right. While the Department of Homeland Security in its products pans permissive social media, the wordings that Matt Taibbi uses is often not helpful. While the Department of Homeland Security in its products pans permissive social media for offering operational advantages to Russians, it also explains that the domestic violent extremist threat requires addressing information gaps. Okay. The FBI in one case sent over so many possible violative content reports that Twitter personnel congratulated each other in the Slack for the monumental undertaking of reviewing them. This is unfreaking believable.
It's amazing that they actually would read this many lame tweets, but in government they will not read the 41,000.
They won't. They're not going to read the budget. Yeah. There were multiple points of entry into Twitter for government flag reports. This letter from Agent Chan to Roth references Teleporter. That's a platform through which Twitter could receive reports from the FBI. Reports also came from different agencies. Here, an employee recommends bouncing content based on evidence from the Department of Homeland Security. State governments also flagged content. Twitter, for instance, received reports via the Partner Support Portal, an outlet created by the Center for Internet Security, a partner organization to the Department of Homeland Security. Why was no action taken? Below, Twitter execs receiving an alert from the California officials by way of our Partner Support Portal debate whether to act on a Trump tweet. And that's them debating it. California hired a pure Sleepy Joe Democrat firm to count and harvest votes. No way Republicans get a fair shake. Lawyers, get started. GOP leader, California is in big trouble. Vote Trump and watch the greatest comeback of them all. Also, New York and Illinois, go for it. So that's what they're talking about. Here, a video was reported by the Election Integrity Project at Stanford. Apparently on the strength of information from the Center for Internet Security. If that's confusing, it's because the Center for Internet Security and the Department of Homeland Security contractor describes itself as partners with the Cyber and Internet Security Agency, CISA, at the Department of Homeland Security.
Oh, great. They're outsourcing it. Well,
yes.
That's how we get some of our best viruses.
The EIP is one of a series of government-affiliated think tanks that mass review content, a list that also includes the Atlantic Council's Digital Forensics Research Laboratory and the University of Washington Center for Informed Policy. The takeaway, what most people think of as the deep state, is really a tangled collaboration of state agencies, private contractors, and sometimes state-funded non-governmental organizations. The lines become so blurred as to be meaningless.
Malware that took $500 million away from Keith Alexander.
Good to know the FBI spends its time flagging joke tweets for Twitter employees rather than investigating reports of Larry Nassar being a serial pedophile. They did nothing for over a year on that one from the first report.
On purpose.
On purpose, but they're on these Twitter reports. Alex Berenson says, most interesting segment of the Twitter file so far, if you don't think the FBI needs serious layoffs, consider that they had 80 agents flagging election jokes.
You know, I see why those agents covered up those molestations. They really want to get a better job working for Larry Nassar.
Yes.
80 agents working at Twitter from the FBI. And Fuzzy. Uh-oh. Are we getting some disruption? We're still coming through. Timeout. Alrighty then. Looks like we're coming through again. Makes you wonder how many FBI agents are working elsewhere. Okay. How about that? I'm sure it's just Starlink. All right. Well, now I've got the music coming through. I didn't have it coming through the whole time. So give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Or whatever. 0. Drop a 0 for no music. Drop a 1 for keep the tunes. Well, now. So they were talking about the Twitter Files Part 6. I want to just skim through Twitter Files Part 8 as presented from Lee Fang. Presented by Lee Fang. Lag timing. Yeah, there's quite a bit of a delay now. Whatever. Sorry, folks. This is why we've gone with a complicated streaming setup for Grand Theft World. All right, Twitter Files Part 8 from Lee Fang. How Twitter quietly aided the Pentagon's covert online PSYOP campaign. This is from December 20th. I'll just read through some of this. Despite promises to shut down covert state-run propaganda networks, Twitter docs show the social media giant directly assisted the U.S. military's influence operations. You guys are... you like the music, except for B1. Big goose eggs. Twitter has claimed for years that they make concerted efforts to detect and thwart government-backed platform manipulation. Here's Twitter testifying to Congress about its pledge to rapidly identify and shut down all state-backed covert information operations and deceptive propaganda. Combating attempts to interfere in conversations on Twitter remains a top priority for the company, and we continue to invest heavily in our detection, disruption, and transparency efforts related to state-backed information operations. Our goal is to remove bad faith actors and to advance public understanding of these critical topics. Remove bad faith actors, except for the FBI, I guess. Twitter defines state-backed information operations as coordinated platform manipulation efforts that can be attributed with a high degree of confidence to state-affiliated actors. State-backed information operations are typically associated with misleading, deceptive, and spammy behavior. These behaviors differentiate coordinated manipulative behavior from legitimate speech on behalf of individuals and political parties. Whenever we identify inauthentic activity on Twitter, that meets our definition of an information operation, in which we are able to confidently attribute to actors associated with the government. We share comprehensive data about this activity. So when is that? So that's testifying to Congress. I wonder what year that was. Whatever. I mean, But behind the scenes, Twitter gave approval and special protection to U.S. military's online psychological influence ops. Despite knowledge that Pentagon propaganda accounts use covert identities, Twitter did not suspend many for around 2 years or more. Some remain active. In 2017, a U.S. Central Command CENTCOM official sent Twitter a list of 52 Arab language accounts we use to amplify certain messages, unquote. The official asked for priority service for 6 accounts, verification for 1, and whitelist abilities for the others. We have a redacted name, redacted email at Twitter. Thanks. Sure is tough to do web ops when you can't tweet. LOL. Wow. Our SOCOM guys mentioned that they'd love to be able to come and meet up for face-to-face talk if you think the right Twitter folks would be up for it. So, SOCOM, CENTCOM, Twitter, and the FBI. This is so number 5 in this thread. The same CENTCOM sent the list. Twitter officials used the tool to grant a special whitelist tag that essentially provides verification status to the accounts without the blue check, meaning they are exempt from spam/abuse flags, more visible, likely to trend on hashtags. The CENTCOM accounts on the list tweeted frequently about U.S. military priorities in the Middle East, including promoting anti-Iran messages, promotion of the Saudi Arabia U.S.-backed war in Yemen, and accurate U.S. drone strikes that claim to only hit terrorists. CENTCOM then shifted strategies and deleted disclosures of ties to the Twitter accounts. The bios of the accounts changed to seemingly organic profiles. One bio read Euphrates Pulse. Another used an apparent deep fake profile pic and claimed to be a source of Iraqi opinion. One Twitter official who spoke to me said he feels deceived by the covert shift. Still, many emails from throughout 2020 show that high-level Twitter executives were well aware of the DoD's vast network of fake accounts and covert propaganda and did not suspend the accounts. For example, Twitter lawyer Jim Baker mused in a July 2020 email that about an upcoming DoD meeting that the Pentagon used poor tradecraft in setting up its network and were seeking strategies for not exposing the accounts that are linked to each other or to DoD or the USG. Stasia Cardiel, I don't know. Another Twitter attorney replied that the Pentagon wanted a SCIF and may want to retroactively classify its social media activities to obfuscate their activity in this space, and that this may represent an overclassification to avoid embarrassment. In several other 2020 emails, high-level Twitter executives, lawyers discussed the covert network and even recirculated the 2017 list from CENTCOM and shared another list of 157 undisclosed Pentagon accounts, again, mostly focused on Middle East military issues. Let's see. In a May 2020 email, Twitter's Lisa Roman emailed the DoD with 2 lists. One list was accounts previously provided to us, and another list Twitter detected. The accounts tweeted in Russian and Arabic on U.S. military issues in Syria/ISIS, and many also did not disclose Pentagon ties. Many of these secretive U.S. military propaganda accounts, despite detection by Twitter as late as 2020, but potentially earlier, continued tweeting through this year, some not suspended until May 2020 or later, according to records I reviewed. In August 2022, a Stanford Internet Observatory report exposed the U.S. military covert propaganda network on Facebook, Telegram, Twitter, and other apps using fake news fake news portals and deep fake images and memes against U.S. foreign adversaries. Let's see what's in this link. This is the report from Stanford. The Stanford Internet Observatory. Interesting. Of course, we talked about Stanford's list of harmful language last night on Grand Theft World. Some graphic analysis of posting patterns. Fake news, fake faces, fake followers. Continuing on with the thread, the U.S. propaganda network relentlessly pushed narratives against Russia, China, and other foreign countries. They accused Iran of threatening Iraq's water security and flooding the country with crystal meth, and of harvesting the organs of Afghan refugees. Them's fighting words, perhaps. The Stanford report did not identify all of the accounts in the network, but one they did name was the exact same Twitter account CENTCOM asked for whitelist privileges in its 2017 email. Verified via Twitter's internal tools, the account used an AI-created deepfake image. Of course, we've seen... What's that website? This person doesn't exist.com or something like that. Many such cases out there, one must anticipate. In subsequent reporting, Twitter was cast as an unbiased hero for removing a network of fake user accounts from promoting pro-Western policy positions. Media covering the story described Twitter as evenly applying its policies and proactive in suspending the DoD network. The reality is much more murky. Twitter actively assisted CENTCOM's network going back to 2017, and as late as 2020, knew these accounts were covert / designed to deceive, to manipulate the discourse, a violation of Twitter's policies and promises. They waited years to suspend. Twitter's comms team was closely in touch with the reporters, working to minimize Twitter's role. When the Washington Post reported on the scandal, Twitter officials congratulated each other because the story didn't mention any Twitter employees and focused largely on the Pentagon. So, we've got the Washington Post. Reporting on this scandal. Twitter and the DoD, hand in hand. The conduct with the U.S. military's covert network stands in stark contrast with how Twitter has boasted about rapidly identifying and taking down covert accounts tied to state-backed influence operations, including Thailand, Russia, Venezuela, and others since 2016. So there is a more detailed report over at The Intercept, which may itself be a propaganda outlet. Maybe. Established with the, was it Snowden or WikiLeaks? Because it was established by Glenn Greenwald. I don't know, that's just a bug in my head from the No Agenda show. So, that's a deep look at DoD operations on Twitter. But I'm sure nobody was using that against the American people, right? I don't really like sarcasm, but there it is. We've got a short report from Fox News from a couple days ago about the Twitter Files Part 9. A bombshell against the FBI.
Listen to this. The 9th installment of the Twitter files has been released. This time, detailing how several government agencies interacted with the platform. Matt Taibbi saying, quote, the files show the FBI acting as doormen to a vast program of social media surveillance and censorship, encompassing agencies across the federal government, from the State Department to the Pentagon to the CIA. He also says that more aggressive government partners had closed Twitter's window of independence for struggling to validate their claims of foreign interference. Here to react, former acting U.S. Attorney General Matt Whitaker. Attorney General, good morning to you. Merry Christmas.
Good morning and Merry Christmas to you, Carly.
Well, the news certainly isn't stopping when it comes to these Twitter files. And now we know that it wasn't just the FBI. It was also the CIA, the Pentagon, the State Department, all had relationships with Twitter and other social media platforms as well. So what do you think the nature of these relationships were?
Well, clearly the relationship was to suppress free speech. I mean, ultimately, it was under the guise of reducing foreign influence, I guess, in American elections, especially in 2020. But you just saw the DHS, DOD, CIA, FBI, and state governments and the Democrat National Committee all had a door into Twitter that they could moderate accounts that they disagreed with or felt were too effective in communicating an opposing viewpoint to what they felt should be on the platform. And, Twitter was clearly the right hand of the federal government in moderating speech.
There's an interesting Twitter back and forth that took place yesterday, and it starts with California Congressman Ted Lieu, who's a Democrat. He posted a tweet saying, Elon Musk, Matt Taibbi, and Michael Schellenberg are gaslighting you with their misleading Twitter file posts. Here's the truth. The FBI's Foreign Influence Task Force does threat indicators sharing with companies. That's a good thing. He also said companies decide what to do with that information. But then Matt Taibbi responded saying, Congressman, why is a Foreign Influence Task Force sending Excel spreadsheets full of joke tweets from low follower accounts in Maryland, Kentucky, and Ohio? Why does the FITF, the Foreign Influence Task Force, spend so much time reviewing domestic speech? I think that's the key question there.
You're right, Carly. That's absolutely the key question to this whole thing is why were these accounts that were, sharing jokes essentially and memes had very few followers. Why were those coming on the FBI's radar? Why was this Foreign Influence Task Force spending their time moderating speech by the American people? I mean, the Supreme Court and the law is very clear. The speech is fairly broad. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. But other than that, there is a very broad ability of Americans to speak their minds. And in this case, the FBI seemed to want to clamp down on that. And now we're seeing it wasn't just the FBI. It was all of these other agencies as well.
Yeah, that's right. And this new dump of Twitter files shows that the FBI was sending so many requests to Twitter that Twitter employees were overwhelmed by the amount of tweets that were being flagged. So now that we're getting a peek behind the curtain, what do you think? Do you think the FBI is going to back off when it comes to monitoring speech?
Well, I would guess that the FBI still feels they have an important role in foreign influence and making sure that these social media platforms aren't used to harm the United States of America. But obviously where that line is drawn, they've had a hard time and struggle with that. So I would imagine they're going to do some soul searching to make sure that they aren't infringing on Americans' rights to free speech.
Yeah, it would be very interesting to hear from the FBI director himself, Chris Wray, on where he stands on all of this. Right. Matt, thank you so much for joining us. Like I said, Merry Christmas to you and your beautiful...
Yeah, that's a good point. The establishment using the term gaslighting is in fact likely gaslighting. And Andrew, I agree that this... kind of wild. This has become like the only news story, and there's still a lot going on. It's a bit overwhelming. I gotta tell you, I'm not really even feeling comfortable doing this. Like I've been trying to focus on what I can control around me, keep up with keeping the show going, and there's only so much time in a day. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. So if you'll bear with me, I do have one more Jimmy Dore video about the Twitter psyops. I think it'll be connected to that thread I read through. All right.
And so there's more Twitter files. And so just let me, spoiler alert, you just need to read this first slide and then you can leave if you want. But we'll show you the fun details later. So Rising Serpent tweets out, so let me see if I understand this correctly. While Twitter was shutting down countless accounts under the excuse of preventing Russian propaganda, the Pentagon and Twitter were literally fronting multiple sock puppet accounts on Twitter to spread propaganda all over the world. Yes, it's like I've always said, the biggest purveyors of misinformation is first the government, then the corporate media. What do you think Twitter is? It's corporate media.
It's not bad when we do it.
Right? The biggest the spreaders of misinformation and disinformation and lies, the government and corporate media.
We need a unipolar misinformation world.
And so that's why it's hilarious to think that there's going to be some corporate media, by the way, an opaque corporate media, nobody knows what they're doing, who they are, in the dark of night, censoring.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, that's usually the smart idea, right? I'll wait till you get to the further.
So Li Feng tweeted these out. So I guess he had the access from Musk on this. He says how Twitter quietly aided the Pentagon's covert online PSYOP campaign. So now you got Twitter doing PSYOPs for the military, but I can't make a joke about the election.
And by the way, they were real noticeable PSYOPs. They weren't like, it wasn't like, oh, I wonder.
Despite promises to shut down covert state-run propaganda networks, Twitter docs show that the social media giant directly assisted the United States military influence operation. So Twitter themselves was out there helping spread misinformation, disinformation, propaganda, and stuff to influence elections. Twitter has claimed for years that they make concerted efforts to detect and thwart government-backed platform manipulation. Turns out they don't.
All right. I'm going to jump ahead. Come on, Jimmy. I just read through all this. Maybe I didn't make it as fun as you. Oh, Thievery Corporation. How apropos. Who knows what I'm talking about? All right, well, screw this. I just read through all these. Let's see if he has a little wrap up.
They go after government propaganda accounts, but in reality, they're propping them up. They're working with them. There is no difference between the government and Twitter when it comes to these things. And as the People's Party tweeted out, the Twitter files prove that the United States military and the intelligence agencies are manipulating social media and running psychological operations on Americans.
Hey, the Smith Modernization Act.
That's right.
Home.
So they got rid of that law that said that the government can't propagandize against their own people, I mean the Americans. Now they do.
Oh, by the way, even when it was against the law, they also were doing that.
They also did it anyway.
They just had to have another department within the department.
So I hope everybody gets it, that you can't trust Twitter, you can't trust Facebook, Instagram, you can't trust corporate America, MSNBC, CNN, Fox, you can't trust the Washington Post and New York Times, and you certainly can't trust Twitter or politicians. Hey,
yeah, I agree. Yeah, there we go. I think we got it. That sums it up. Yeah. Thievery Corporation. I had a great night at the Merriweather Post Pavilion once, seeing Thievery Corporation and Manu Chao. Leave it at that. It was a fun time. Good tunes. Oh, it's hard to turn this off. This is just background music. Is it super loud now? It's hard to tell. I have it turned down from my headphones. Psyopery. I like Thievery Corporation because they call themselves the outer nationalist as opposed to the internationalist. So they kind of, this was their outer nationalist sound. At the very least, good vibrations. We'll just pause for a second here. I've always wanted to just be a bass player in a reggae band. I think that would be fun. But you know, I want a bluegrass band and a blues band where I play electric guitar. It's a lot of freaking demands, huh? All right. Thanks for bearing with me there for a second. So shifting gears into a little Fauci stuff. We're going to get a little NPR ASMR with Brett and Heather. I got a couple of not too long, well, a short clip and then a not too long clip. We'll get into it a little bit. Check out what they had to say that didn't make it on Grand Theft World last night. Brett and Heather coming at you. It's been a while.
This is actually a good moment to reveal that Tony is in fact our Lord and Savior. If you could show my screen here, this editor-in-chief of Science magazine this week published this editorial in Science. The headline is, "Thank you, Tony." Okay, so he, the editor-in-chief of Science magazine, one of the two premier science journals in the world, has done an interview with Tony Fauci. And he's just put some of the highlights into this thing, and then you can go listen. I have not. You can go listen to the whole interview if you like. Anthony Fauci, Tony, to friends, colleagues, and many journalists, has never backed down from controversy. It begins, just a few quotes here. "We talked a lot about this, the editor-in-chief of Science and Tony Fauci. We talked a lot about misinformation and the forces sowing doubts about COVID-19 vaccinations and interventions such as masks and lockdowns." Did you? Love to hear that. "We agreed that one of the biggest challenges with which the scientific community must grapple is misinformation that comes from within. I ran to that like a stone wall at a congressional hearing," he said, describing how his skepticism of an argument put forward by researchers who questioned the necessity of COVID-19 lockdowns was met with admonishment. Quote, "You're arrogant because you're disrespecting other scientists," he was told. Fauci's response, quote, "You don't want to be disparaging of anyone, but you've got to come back and push against those things that are not true." This is so backwards and upside down. And one more thing, we also talked about how we need to do a better job of conveying that science is a process and not a collection of facts set in stone. Nowhere's on a guy named Anthony Fauci, frankly.
Well, okay, but so
can you believe this guy?
I don't like the way they've titled this. I think it really should have been titled, "Oh, Tony, your science is so big. Science me harder, Tony," or something, right?
No, but it's the Christmas season, so I think.
All right, so they toned it down for the kids, but
no, he's Christ. I mean, they're making him in.
They are, yeah. And well, that's a promotion because he was just science before, and now science me harder, Tony. Oh, Tony, your science is. I think it really should have been titled, "Oh, Tony, your science is so big. Oh, Tony, your science is so. Oh, Tony, your science is so big. Science me harder, Tony," or something, right?
No, but it's the Christmas season, so I think.
All right, so they toned it down for the kids, but
no, he's Christ. I mean, they're making him in.
They are, and well, that's a promotion because he was just science before, and now
now he's both.
Now he's
science and Christ.
He has ascended.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, he has ascended in his stepping down from his former role. But okay, this is frankly right. If there wasn't so much writing on all this, this is funny. Right? The fact that people cannot help but die from the terrible advice and treatments they're getting makes this utterly ghastly. But the absurdity of it would be funny otherwise. But I wanted to point out, this isn't just the science types and the science journals getting tangled in knots about this and your doctor giving you bad advice. The public.
It's not just all of that.
It's not just all of that.
Yes.
What's happened is they have carved out the space to make a completely fictional scientific reality that is not obligated to match anything in the actual real world anymore. And everybody who, signed up for the idea that they were the real scientists is now being carried into this fantasy science world along with them.
Fantasy science. Yeah. Excuse me while I download that video real quick. That's got to be on the soundboard. I do not have those ISOs yet, so I'm going to work on that process right now. Oh boy. Yeah. Right this second. Hell. No, that would be a bit much. I mean, I could do that right now, but that's for later. I definitely gotta ISO those. I haven't pulled any ISOs for a while. So yeah. Oh, what happened? Come on, get it together, Driggs. So there's another video from Brett and Heather on, well, let's see if that's their home for the holidays set. I keep clicking the wrong one. Let's see what gems might be in this one. So back to Brett and Heather. Research suggests 3 million lives. That's researching quotation marks. Suggests 3 million lives were saved by vaccines in the U.S. Clips from Livestream 153.
Many listening will have heard that COVID vaccines saved 1 million lives. No, wait, it's actually 3 million. Correction. And reduced hospitalizations by like 18 million. I think this is the U.S. only, or is this worldwide?
That is the U.S. only.
U.S. only.
That is the claim.
For instance, new study, I just took off the person tweeting it because she doesn't need to be dragged for this in particular, although she should really wake up since she claims to be a medical doctor. New study out shows that COVID-19 vaccines have averted over 3 million deaths, 18 million hospitalizations, and saved $1 trillion in medical costs in U.S. And it's a link to an article at commonwealthfund.org. Hold on. 2 years and commonwealthfund.org, 2 years of U.S. COVID-19 vaccines have prevented millions of hospitalizations. So I actually have, Zachary, a PDF of that to show where I've got some stuff highlighted. Let me just make it full screen here. Okay, you can show it now. So this is a PDF. We'll also link to the article on the web. This is the research in question. This is the research that finds that 3 million deaths in the U.S. have been averted with these vaccines and 18 million hospitalizations and saved $1 trillion. Okay, and it's out of the University of Maryland and Yale and Yale School of Public Health and all sorts of important places. Well,
yes, this research. How pray tell did they manage to wrestle this pattern from the data?
Yeah, well, as it turns out, this is literally a blog post. So let's just start there.
Yeah.
I'm burying the lead here, but this is literally a blog post. Now, this thing has now been cited by, well, apparently Anthony Fauci himself. This research is now the biggest news in how amazing the COVID vaccines are. This is literally a blog post. This is from the same category of people, the same class of people who throughout COVID, when many of us have been talking about papers on preprint servers that haven't yet been peer-reviewed, oh, you can't talk about that because until it's been peer-reviewed, it's not real science. This is a blog post. There aren't even any references. It's not even that they didn't include the references, but they clearly have them. There aren't even any references, okay? So this ain't research. They may have done research, and we're going to get to what, in fact, they claim to have done, but this is all that is available, that all of the headlines and all of the doctors online are referring to is a report in which all of the actual stuff that was done is completely opaque. That's not how science works.
Okay, so two connections. One, we've seen this trick. Tony, right? So many times. The Together trial, right? We had a slide from a presentation for more than half a year. Tony, your science is so big, which then took experts weeks to unpack.
But it's the Yale School of Public Health. What could go wrong? I mean, come on, these are the experts, these are the authorities. I'm sure they've got glassware. I'm sure they've got lab coats. I know they've got the relevant degrees.
I'm not sure they have any of those things. I know what they've got, though. Grant money. So can we show the clip of Anthony Fauci referring to this piece of research?
Before we get to what it actually says?
I think it's kind of the right order to do it.
Excellent. Yes, let's do it. So Zach has that?
Yeah.
But the latest now, Dr. Fauci, is Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. He's now asking the Florida Supreme Court to greenlight an investigation into, and the way he put it, is any and all wrongdoing in Florida with respect to COVID-19 vaccines. What's your reaction to that?
I don't have a clue, Kate, what he's asking for. I mean, we have a vaccine that unequivocally is highly effective and safe and has saved literally millions of lives. The Commonwealth Fund has come out with a report just this past week that vaccinations that have been administered over this period of time, this last year and a half to 2 years, has saved 3.2 million lives, 18 million hospitalizations, and approximately $1 trillion in costs. So what's the problem with vaccines? I mean, vaccines are life-saving. So quite frankly, Kate, I'm not sure what they're trying to do down there.
It kind of gets at a bigger issue I've been wanting to ask you as in one of our final interviews in your role in public health is just the one result of the pandemic has sadly been that science has become a divisive topic, politicized and weaponized by some people. Have you thought about how do you pull that back? How do you turn that around?
You know, Kate, if I had an easy answer, I'd give it to you, but it's a very difficult situation. You're absolutely correct. It has been politicized, and it has been politicized in a way that has actually caused lives, because if people don't get...
All right, so that was Anthony.
So unfortunately, I haven't seen that, and the way we have things set up, I couldn't hear it, so I don't know what he said.
So, and that was Anthony Fauci in response to the question about what Governor DeSantis is doing with his call for a grand jury. That is Anthony Fauci saying, I don't know what Ron DeSantis is up to. The vaccines have saved, a report out this week says the vaccines have saved more than 3 million lives.
Do you know what they actually did?
I do.
They took the assumption that vaccines save lives, and they plugged that into their model. And then they said, now let's imagine a universe with vaccines that save lives and without vaccines that save lives. And see if at the end of that running of that simulation, the universe in which the vaccines, which do save lives, have saved lives, at the end of the simulation, are more lives saved in a universe in which vaccines that save lives exist? Or are there more lives saved in a world without vaccines that do save lives? They started with the conclusion, which we've also seen.
Now, this is reminding me of the Club of Rome stuff we were looking at last night on Grand Theft World, where they're saying ran the simulations and everything. Yeah, I don't know how to sum it up. Forgive me, but it seems like a parallel, does it not? It could be. They ran the simulations
over and over and over again, and then they, voila, acted surprised when out popped their results.
So, in a model, which is not data, right? They plugged in an assumption which would automatically give them an astronomical number for the number of lives saved.
So specifically, just in terms of what they did, Zach, if you would show my screen again. This, again, the so-called research that everyone is alluding to, the thing that is not a research paper in any way, at the very end, there's a how we conducted this study section, which in a normal paper would be right after the introduction, between the introduction and the results, and would actually spell out precisely what was done and would reference all of the claims that are in any way not general knowledge already. How we conducted the study at the end of this blog post is them saying basically what I just said, and then vaccine efficacies against infection and symptomatic and severe disease for different vaccine types, for each variant and by time since vaccination, were drawn from published estimates. That's it.
Right.
That is the evidence. That is. And we don't even know what the published estimates are.
Well,
this is beyond scientific malpractice.
Yes.
This is complete insanity, and is being, all the CNN viewers are now convinced that St. Fauci has spoken the word of God because the Yale School of Public Health has just done this research, which they did something for sure, but they put out a blog post in which they buried the actual thing that they did by saying that their evidence that these vaccines are effective was drawn from published estimates. What estimates were those? How were those gathered? And were they themselves accurate? That is what we need to know if the vaccine saved lives. They did not assess anything to do with whether or not the vaccines actually saved lives here.
Right. Now, there have been a number of good analyses of this, and they have discovered where the bodies are buried here, or not buried as the case may be.
Meaning they have actually found the references?
They have found the model on which these things are built, because this is, of course, the second report from this group. And so there's a history of...
Right, the model on which it's built is one thing, but like the estimates.
I would point people to Brett Swanson's Substack. He's a data analyst who has been excellent on questions regarding COVID. And he reveals that this model, in this case, requires an estimate of the number of people who would have died from COVID that consistently exceeds the maximum number that ever did on a daily basis, right? So they have simply taken an absurd number in light of a...
Okay, but that's a different question. I mean, that's a different problem with the model, right? The problem that I'm pointing out is they have made the claim that the vaccines save lives.
Right.
Like, far aside from the actual research that we can see that they did here, which is given that we started with the assumptions that we won't tell you exactly how we made them and exactly the nature of what they were. But now let's start with these models of sort of the population and such. That's the level you're talking about, because that is transparent-ish if you know how to read this blog post.
Right. Now, what you're saying is, and I totally agree with this, that this is fraud because it's being done by people who understand why you can't do this. This isn't high school students, right? These are presumably people who have studied data sets and know what you can and cannot do. And
I wouldn't have passed this paper if it came to me as a college class.
It doesn't matter what level of study you're at. This is perfectly circular. What they did is they told a model that these were highly effective vaccines at saving lives, and then they asked them whether they were highly effective at saving lives. It's perfectly circular.
Yes.
Now, for those of us who saw that clip of Fauci on CNN saying, basically parroting this as if it was a result, which it is not.
Right.
It is a model, right? For somebody like Fauci to invoke that number taken from this source tells you something that many people have been reluctant to accept. This is a knowing lie, right? Dr. Fauci has plenty of training and a tremendous amount of experience. He knows the difference between this and a result that shows that this has happened.
So
All right. Suffice it to say, they sound really smart. And safe to say Anthony Fauci is a fucking liar. Right? I mean, we can move on. Ooh. Seems like he always has been. Still is. Case closed. I'm being facetious. I mean, there's more to that video. I don't mean to be flippant. I guess I do. But let's get deeper. On a more serious note. We'll check in for a little bit. Christy Lee talking to former BlackRock portfolio manager Ed Dowd, discussing the uptick in deaths. Winter vagina is not what is causing sudden deaths, y'all. FYI, let's learn more.
I just noticed a bunch of incongruent statements, and I just started to smell BS on a macro metadata level. The doctors have the science. I have, unfortunately, the evidence of the crime. It kind of began with you. My first interview with you went viral, and then everybody wanted to talk to me, and it's kind of been an odyssey since then. And one of the articles I saw, like in November, December of last year from one of the UK papers was blood clotting can be caused by cold weather, and also winter vagina, whatever that is, can be caused by cold weather. They call it winter vagina. I don't even know what that is.
I don't know what that is either.
Yeah, we first have to make people know that they've just been hoodwinked and potentially poisoned. It's a global tragedy. The numbers are so bad that the crime is so big that the global governments and our health authorities see what we see, and now they're in cover-up mode. And I predicted vaccine passports. I predicted central bank digital currency. I predicted mandates. They all came to pass. I was called a crazy conspiracy theorist in 2020 there, but I just wanted to give you a shout out for starting it all off for me. This is a national security issue. I mean, we've just potentially poisoned the whole military, all the most able-bodied workers amongst us, and college students. So this needs to stop.
Hang on, where are my manners? I managed to. I don't know if the audio is coming through.
Today's guest is Ed Dowd. He's the author of.
Time out. I did manage to get those things ISO'd, so we've got some new joy on the soundboard.
Take it.
Oh, Tony, your science is so big. Science me harder, Tony.
Okay, back to Winter Vagina Report.
Cause unknown, the epidemic of sudden deaths in 2021 and 2022. He's a former Wall Street analyst, a former BlackRock portfolio manager. And because he's a numbers guy, he was seeing some interesting trends, we'll say, with young people dying. So without further ado, let me bring in Ed Dowd. Thank you so much for joining me again.
Thanks for having me on again, Christy. It kind of began with you. My first interview with you went viral, and then everybody wanted to talk to me, and it's kind of been an odyssey since then. It's been a strange year, 2022. And you know, the book actually wasn't something I went to go pitch to other people. It was pitched to me because the way I'm looking at the data is so important that a bunch of people decided that they wanted this message to get out, and a book is an easy way to do that. And we formatted the book so that it's for the marginal mind. It's for the person who doesn't really think anything's going on. And we established that it's true, that this is a tragedy that's occurring. Excess death and disability are up across the board since the introduction of the vaccines. And we link anecdotal stories, which is what first turned me on to the problem, sudden athletic deaths. And it's a book that is it's not, even though I'm a data guy, it's an easy, quick read. It takes 3 to 4 hours. It's 210 pages, but it's chock full of information. that most people haven't seen. And it really, I wanted to, as a data guy, it's easy to look at a spreadsheet and just look at the numbers and kind of be like, oh, hum, it's excess death. But I wanted to put a human face on this and the tragedies that are occurring. And each of those stories are QR coded. You can link to a local story. But as we know, the national media and the global governments are in cover-up mode. And these are things you're not going to know about unless you have some sort of intuitive sense that this isn't normal, and it's not. So we can go from there. But I just wanted to give you a shout out for starting it all off for me.
Well, I'm glad. It's funny because when I first reached out to you about what you were seeing, this trend toward sudden deaths that were not even really being addressed, why they were happening. You had said to me, "Is my 15 minutes of fame up?" And it just kind of whirlwinded from there, and here you are just months later, an author. So it's been really remarkable to see. But I want people to learn more about you and your background. So you were on Wall Street, and when did that change, or when did you get out of that, or explain your journey that brought you to this place?
Well, I'm still on Wall Street in that I'm trying to start a hedge fund with some gentlemen who have really helped with the vaccine issue. We started with the vaccine issue, and then these are former Wall Street guys who wanted to start a hedge fund, so we put our heads together. But the hedge fund is for later. We're trying to stop the vaccination program. And I've kind of been entrepreneurial on Wall Street. I tried to start another hedge fund in 2017, and now I'm hooked up with these two guys. And I'm just an entrepreneur. And, because I'm not directly on Wall Street, I'm on Maui, doing my own thing. I don't have the noise and the groupthink and the herdthink that goes on. And so I've always kind of been a contrarian, made my bones early on in the dot-com fraud. I mean, I was at DLJ, Donaldson, Lufkin, Jenrette, in equity research right after business school. And it was from 1997 to 99. And I was right down the hall. I was electric utilities, which is boring. They're not that exciting. And right down the hall were the internet guys. And DLJ Equity Research was paid directly by investment banking. They got 5% of all the IPO profits. And so the internet guys my age, I was 30 at the time, were making $1 million a year. I was making peanuts. And they're making $1 million a year because they're pumping out these garbage companies. And that's when I saw my first, fraud, institutional fraud. I mean, these things never should have been IPO'd, but they were, because there was an appetite for, new things, and the stocks would go up without any revenues or cash flows. It was based on eyeballs, if you remember. Or maybe you don't. You look young to me. You might have been.
I'm not as young as you think, but I'll take it.
You might have been in high school or grade school. I don't know.
I think we talked about this before, actually, Ed. But my background is my family owns a financial business, and so I actually passed my Series 66, my Series 7, and so I was working as both a stockbroker and a reporter at the same time for a while until I couldn't do both. As you can imagine, it's a little bit difficult to
right.
do. But yeah, I do have a pretty good understanding of what you're talking about. So you were doing that, and you're still involved in that world. So how on earth did you start looking at, we'll say, a medical topic and these deaths? What was the connection?
Well, so I saw the fraud, the dot-com fraud, then I saw the real estate financial fraud, and every fraud I parlayed into a better job. So I left the job I left DLJ, went up to the buy side up in Boston, became a stock picker, and parlayed my understanding of this dot-com fraud into a job at BlackRock. And then we were able to steer our fund through that because I can see fraud. And I'm just someone that I'm my own authority. And, my job was to sit in front of corporate CEOs who are basically pitching their stock. And I have a nose for BS, and I could tell when someone's lying to me. And, it's not what they say, it's what they do. So that, CEOs would come in and say, blah, 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 trying to sell us a stock. And then I notice actions that were contrary to that, or little statements. So I was good at avoiding some of the major frauds. We weren't involved in Enron. We missed all the bank blowups and the financial crisis. And so that's what I'm good at, is discerning the truth. And as a stock picker, you make your big money when you live in the world between perception and reality. So perception is X, but then you discover a new reality, Y, that the herd is not aware of, and that's how. And so you make a bet on a stock, or you get out of a stock before it blows up, depending upon the reality. If the reality is good, you get long the stock. Then you pitch this idea to all your peers and the sell side. So I was good at that. And so when this COVID thing hit, I just noticed a bunch of incongruent statements, and I just started to smell BS on a macro metadata level. And then when early on, those of us in the financial community since the great financial crisis knew that this was eventually going to blow up. So they solved that crisis by buying all the fraudulent bonds onto the central bank's balance sheet. So the fraud never disappeared. The fraud went into the central bank balance sheets. Global governments started spending like drunken sailors to keep the economy afloat. And what we've had is a zombie economy for 12 years globally. And the only people who seem to do very well the last 12 years are those who are close to the printing presses. So we all knew in the financial community that eventually this was going to blow up. And it looked like it was going to blow up in 2019. There was some crises in the repo markets. Overnight rates exploded in the fall of 2019. It looked like a global slowdown was coming. And then COVID mysteriously hit. And I was scared of COVID like everybody else initially. And in fact, I was so far ahead of the curve that on Maui, I bought toilet paper a month before people were even aware there was COVID. So, but then quickly, I saw a Federal Reserve Bank Chairman, President James Bullard, a month after the lockdowns, talk about how, he was asked the question, how are we going to pull people out of the economy, this economics fear of the virus? And he said, well, I forget who, it was on Face the Nation, I forget the reporter, but he said, well, we'll say her name's Debbie. Well, Debbie, we have new technologies where we can test people every day and issue immunity badges. And then we have surveillance technologies as well. And that's when it all clicked. This was potentially an excuse to cover up global sovereign debt defaults. So I was on high alert in the spring of 2020, and I predicted vaccine passports, I predicted central bank digital currency, I predicted mandates. They all came to pass. I was called a crazy conspiracy theorist in 2020. So when the vaccine came out, I was not going to take it because A, it was experimental, and it was B, never tested on humans, and C, Operation Warp Speed, which sounds like a disaster to me. So early on, I started hearing anecdotes of what was going on in my community, injuries and mysterious deaths. And then the sudden athletic deaths started appearing, and I was on that early. So once the mandates officially came in the summer of 2021, I started protesting on Maui. I became enraged. I was like, I'm not living in a world where I have to be forced to get something experimental to keep my job. And it just made no sense to me. I eventually hooked up with Dr. Malone. He came to Maui, and that's how I think Dr. Malone gave you my name, and you reached out to me. And I told Dr. Malone I was going to look at the insurance company results, the funeral home results, and we would, if we were right about the vaccine, it would show up in those databases. And sure enough, it did. And as we rolled forward, it's a global tragedy. The numbers are so bad that the crime is so big that the global governments and our health authorities see what we see, and now they're in cover-up mode. And that's one of the reasons we put the book out, is to at least stop people from getting more boosters if you're already vaccinated. And it's just really we view this as a kind of a grind grassroots effort. And once we get enough people woken up to what's just happened, things will change. But it's a grind, and it's a long battle, and I'm in it. I'm trying to start a hedge fund. My partners at Finance Technologies have put all the data of all excess death for Europe, UK, the US. We just did Australia yesterday. We're going to do Canada. And we've done US disabilities. It's a disaster. And the data is available for all to see. And so that's kind of the mission now, is to create a company that's going to unfortunately take advantage of this tragedy, but not directly in stocks. It's a global macro hedge fund. And, we're going to raise money. And that's also social proof that something's gone off the rails, is that we have smart, well-heeled investors that want to talk to us because they see what we see. And it's the beginning of what I call the cleanup of the tragedy. And we first have to make people know that they've just been hoodwinked and potentially poisoned.
I do want to dig in more to that, but I wanted to back up a little bit. How did you connect with Dr. Malone?
There were protests on Maui. He came to Maui for a rally, and someone recognized me from Twitter because I was very vocal on Twitter. I was on Twitter in the world of what's called FinTwit, finance Twitter, and I was railing against what I thought was fraud on a deep level. I said that it looked like the clinical trials were fraudulent. I was using the F word. So people recognized me from Twitter at these protests. They were involved in getting Dr. Malone to come to the island, and they thought it was important to have my voice there. So I met him. We did write for him what's called the Malone Doctrine because he was railing against the CDC, the FDA, and the NIH. And we said, well, those hills are occupied. We need to establish a new hill of integrity. So we wrote a document. He loved it. And the document, my hedge fund is incorporating those principles. Everything is open sourced. We're going to release the data. We want people to contribute to it. So we're embodying the Malone Doctrine. And that's how I hooked up with him. And, he's eventually going to start a foundation, and the Malone Doctrine will be central to that. We gave it to him because his profile was much higher than ours. We were just 4 dudes on the island. But the idea is centered on, it's a declaration of independence from institutions that don't follow the 10 principles, most of which are no censorship, free open access to data that drives you to make decisions. Right now, the CDC won't give us the data. The FDA doesn't give you the data. So our bureaucratic institutions that we pay for are making decisions on data that we're not allowed to see. It's insane.
It's crazy. I mean, I just feel like one of the most compelling arguments was when they tried to hide data for 75 years. It's like, if no one can debate you, if it's all just a conspiracy theory, like why try to hide your data so aggressively and so laughably? But you were talking about getting a lot of this information, you said, from insurance charts. That's how you were able to see these trends of sudden deaths?
So we started off with public earnings announcements, and in the fourth quarter of 2020.
All right. I apologize. I'm going to have to cut it short. I'm short on time tonight. I got to be responsible. Yeah, might be drizzle. Interesting connections. Who can we trust? Spook. Is he a spook? Former BlackRock portfolio manager. We didn't get to the clickbaity part of it. Winter vagina report. We didn't get to that, did we? You'll have to go check that out in the show notes. Show notes will be posted at freedomunitedrevolt.com underneath the blog page. It's not really a blog, is it? But these offerings. freedomunitedrevolt.com, where you can also support the show if you find value in what I'm doing here with the Grand Theft World podcast efforts. So just a couple shortish ones I want to look at. Well, maybe just one. I'm interested in this. I'm not sure who this Michael Saylor guy is, but talking about FTX, talking about SBF. I'm not finished yet. See, I should. I'm gonna play this one more, and then a little music and shut it down. So this is from Decentralized Fusion. SBF is going away. This is Michael Saylor.
The Sam Bankman-Frieds of the world can't print their own token, do insider wash trading, manipulate the price up to $8 billion, and then tank it to zero overnight. That's why the laws exist. He could have never operated the exchange. Alameda would be out of business, FTX would be out of business, and the FTT token would be out of business if they had actually had to file a registration statement with the SEC. Because those were all insider conflicts of interest, and there's nothing ethical or legal about any of it, right? And so they couldn't have done it. And so the reason that it makes sense to file registration statements and take equities public is in order to avoid these kind of FTX, FTT frauds that basically destroy people. Now, there's a big there is a stigma attached to related party transactions in public companies, rightfully so, because Alameda was a related party to FTX, and FTT was a related party. So Sam Bankman-Fried is the issuer of FTT, is the owner of Alameda, a hedge fund, and is the operator and owner of FTX. Those were three related parties. The reason that there's a stigma is if you took FTX public and you said, by the way, FTX accepts FTT, which is a related party issued token, and it does business with Alameda. The question that a skeptical investor would have is, well, since the same person controls all three, is it possible that he actually wired the systems to give himself an advantage? And if it turns out that Alameda has $1 billion trading loss, will Sam Bankman-Fried, the CEO of FTX, liquidate Alameda in order to protect the interest of the other customers? Or will Sam not liquidate them to protect his own interest? He has a conflict of interest. Mm-hmm. And we know how the story ends. By the way, the other question would be, since Sam has billions of dollars, $8 billion worth of FTT token, will Sam, the CEO of a bank, issue credit against the $8 billion of the token that he issued himself and give himself preferential treatment? Or will there be an arm's length transaction? So here's an interesting question, Daniel. If you were an arm's length, if this was an arm's length relationship and there was a disinterested financial executive running FTX, how much credit do you think they would have extended Alameda for $8 billion of FTT token?
Nowhere near what they did.
Yeah, we know they gave them billions and billions of dollars of credit, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe up to $10 billion of credit.
Well, how much did you get as a bona fide MicroStrategy CEO when you were in the market trying to raise cash, right? There's the direct comparison that we can use.
Yeah. If I were to go to a bank and say, I have some locked MicroStrategy stock, will you loan me money against it? They would say, no, zero. If I went to them, zero, right? The answer, by the way, to the question is a disinterested CEO of a crypto bank that was honest and competent would have lent Alameda somewhere between $0 and $10 million.
All right.
Like the number is not one order of magnitude less. It's not even two orders of magnitude less, right? It's somewhere in the range of 3 orders of magnitude less. If you were honest and competent, you would basically say, well, what is 5% of the honest trading liquidity in the token? If the thing trades 100 million a day, but 80 million is wash trading, there's 20 million a day. Well, how much of that is trading on another exchange, not your own? Oh, 3 million a day. Okay, so $3 million of this stuff trades on another exchange. Can I trust that one? No, they're not. None of them are regulated. Okay, how much trades, on any regulated exchange? Well, of course, none of it, right? But let's say I threw out the issue of a regulated, transparent exchange. I just said, well, how much trades on an exchange other than one you own? 10 million. Okay, I'll give you 10% of that. I'll give you $1 million of collateral value. Okay, how much could you borrow against $1 million in collateral? Well, the max is 50% loan to value, 50. So I will give you a $500,000 loan against $8 billion of FTT token. That's the right answer if you're honest and competent. So obviously that didn't happen. The reason it didn't happen is because you had 3 related parties all terminating with one boss, and the one boss was not honest, not competent, and not disinterested, right? A biased, dishonest, incompetent person. Okay, what could go wrong? Well, when you have 3 related parties and a biased, incompetent, dishonest person, what can go wrong is the entire thing gets burned to zero. And is that likely? Yes, highly likely. It's not even just what could go wrong. It's highly likely. That's the reason there's a stigma attached to related party transactions. You would never want the CEO of a bank to be issuing loans to a private company that they owned, right? I mean, like, if it turned out that the CEO of JP Morgan was issuing billion-dollar loans to Jamie Dimon, real estate development company, jointly owned with him and his wife, right? People would just lose it, right? For obvious reasons. It seems like they just don't really want to, they don't feel that they have the authority to regulate offshore entities, right? I mean, that's been the big blind spot.
Because he had it all registered in the Bahamas.
Right. I mean, FTX was in the Bahamas. And so there's this vacuum of power, right? A blind spot where the U.S. regulators don't feel like they have authority to regulate offshore entities. And the action they've taken has been via civil enforcement actions, which are very slow and very expensive, like take years and years and years. And so they have pursued a number of entities via civil enforcement slowly, but they haven't really laid out any global framework for digital assets, and they haven't pursued offshore entities. They haven't even really pursued onshore entities that aggressively. So there's been a lack of effective enforcement, I think you could say, and a question about who should take leadership of it. But Congress has been mired. They haven't passed a law. They couldn't pass a stablecoin law. They haven't passed. There is no law or clarity with regard to how do you register a digital commodity? How do you register a digital security? How do you register a digital currency? How do you register a digital token? Right? There's not even a definition in law of what is a digital. If I said define a digital token, digital security, digital commodity, and digital currency, it'd be hard to get people to define it. I think there'd be a lot of debate about people not even understanding it, right? I bet you we can't get people to agree. For example, you think people will agree on the difference between a digital security and a digital token? What's the difference? It's not well understood. There's no taxonomy. A lot of people think Bitcoin is a digital currency, but in fact, it's really more a digital commodity. Tether and Circle should be thought of as digital currencies. I can't tell you why we don't have a clear regulatory regime. I can't tell you why, because that's politics. It's above my pay grade. I mean, somewhere between the administration, the SEC, the CFTC, Congress, and the Senate and Treasury, they could determine why.
All right. I want to look up who Michael Saylor is real quick. So Michael J. Saylor, American entrepreneur and business executive, executive chairman and co-founder of MicroStrategy, a company that provides business intelligence, mobile software, and cloud-based services. MIT graduate. Internal consultant for DuPont. Well, interesting. Yeah, you might think, well, that lack of regulation with cryptocurrencies, that's a good thing for freedom. It's not such a good thing when you get a bunch of celebrities and Matt Damon hyping something like FTX and getting a whole bunch of people to throw their money in without understanding what the fuck they're getting involved with. So, I was going to say, let's hope. And what's that worth? I don't know. Let's hope that doesn't lead to, that this whole shit show with FTX and SBF doesn't lead to regulation and, steering us, funneling us to the Fed coin paradigm. But what's hope worth? I don't know. So I should have played this video first. This is from Finance Mark, going over some of Caroline Ellison's shocking testimony. So this will be the last thing we'll get to. Both of these were from the Grand Theft World show card. And thanks for the kind words in the chat. Feel like I'm experiencing some increased introspection, feeling like my energy levels are off, but then again, I'm more of a mellow guy, and I guess you guys hang out because you appreciate my energy to some degree. So I appreciate you saying so. So let's check this one out before we wrap it up here on this Tuesday, before these leftovers get real stanky. We're gonna have to leave some nice morsels behind, unfortunately. Maybe next week. We'll see. There were some things I wanted to catch, but all right.
Whole-scale misconduct at Alameda Research and FTX.com. I've previously covered Caroline Ellison and Gary Wang pleading guilty to several fraud-related charges, but now the transcripts from her court hearing have been released. Notably, just after Sam Bankman-Fried came back into the United States to face his own fraud-related charges. Now, these transcripts are incredibly eye-opening, but really they just confirm what many of us had already suspected. The first category pertained to borrowings at Alameda Research, and there are several statements here. Caroline Ellison says, from 2019 to 2022, I was aware that Alameda was provided access to a borrowing facility on FTX.com, the cryptocurrency exchange run by Mr. Bankman-Fried. I understood that executives had implemented special settings on Alameda's FTX.com account that permitted Alameda to maintain negative balances in fiat currencies and cryptocurrencies. Basically, FTX.com seemingly would enable Alameda to trade while insolvent. They would give Alameda access to capital to keep losing money, because as I've previously remarked, Alameda was seemingly not very good at actually trading or making money because they lost money during the crypto bull market. So enabling them to maintain a negative balance basically was just tossing good money after bad. Caroline Ellison then continues. In practical terms, this arrangement permitted Alameda to access an unlimited line of credit without being required to post collateral, without having to pay interest on negative balances, and without being subject to margin calls on FTX.com's liquidation protocols. Now here in this statement, there's a few things to disentangle. The first one, of course, is FTX was seemingly just funneling money into Alameda. Alameda might lose that money, and then FTX would get some money and put that into Alameda. Now, in theory, because FTX is a closely held corporation, they could use operating profits to prop up Alameda. Now, clearly, then the investors in FTX would be slightly annoyed by this, i.e. Sequoia, OTPP, etc., would be irritated if operating profits were being used to prop up another division that never had any chance of making money. But using operating profits would be an order of magnitude less bad than using customers' funds. And that's where we start to get the whole-scale fraud. We get fraud for possibly a couple of reasons. One, many of the people going onto this platform were not going into the margin trading environment, so their funds should never have been used for any of this lending. But even if you're looking at those investors who had gone onto the margin trading platform, they might have agreed to ordinary margin trading terms, but they hadn't agreed to their money being funneled into a fund that seemingly had unlimited access to funds, that was not subject to ordinary collateral requirements, and could never be margin called. That is a very different proposition from being on an ordinary margin trading platform. Caroline Ellison also states, I also understood that Alameda had financed the investments with short-term and open-term loans worth several $1 billion from external lenders in the crypto industry. In or around June 2022, I agreed to borrow several $1 billion from FTX to repay those loans. I understood that FTX would need to use customers' funds to finance loans to Alameda. And there we have it. FTX clearly used customers' funds to finance additional loans to Alameda. That is over and above them just giving Alameda unlimited access to margin trading facilities. Here, they were just taking customers' funds and giving a loan to Alameda Research. In essence, inappropriate use of customers' funds, customers not being informed about exactly what was going on with Alameda when they should have been, and also customers who were never doing margin trading having their money funneled into this risky, stupid fund that was seemingly never actually going to make any money whatsoever. Caroline Ellison also details some of what she did with the money that Alameda had. Now, Alameda clearly lost a lot of money on its investments. Being incompetent is not necessarily a crime. Some of the other uses of funds might well have been, where she specifically states, while I was co-CEO and then CEO, I understood that Alameda had numerous large illiquid investments and had lent a lot of money to Mr. Bankman-Fried and other FTX executives. In essence here, money was being funneled from Alameda Research to the executives of FTX. These quote-unquote loans might never have been intended to be repaid, or they might have been loans on potentially uncommercial, favorable interest rates. So if we piece this all together, it looks like customers' funds could be funneled into Alameda Research, which would then quote-unquote loan that money to FTX executives, and those executives might never repay those loans. When you look at it that way, it looks an awful lot like customers' funds were being funneled into the pockets of FTX executives. Now, clearly that's something that is going to need to be proven at court at Sam Bankman-Fried's trial, but it looks incredibly damaging, and it does look very much like outright fraud. And onto the topic of outright fraud, she also talks about what happened with the balance sheets for Alameda Research. Caroline Ellison specifically states, we prepared certain quarterly balance sheets that concealed the extent of Alameda's borrowing and the billions of dollars in loans that Alameda had made to FTX executives and related parties. Basically, they doctored the accounts here. That is super bad. It clearly shows a degree of fraud with respect of the lenders to Alameda Research and potentially the investors, if those investors were ever presented with those balance sheets. And if those investors are doing any of their job as major venture capitalists investing potentially billions of dollars into this company, they should have at least gotten balance sheets at some point in time. And this is where the fraud against the lenders, so the securities fraud and the wire fraud, really come into being in relation to those types of admissions. Now, given that Alameda was seemingly operating in conjunction with FTX here, and that FTX, i.e. Sam Bankman-Fried, was presumably in the know about exactly what Alameda did, this does not bode well for Sam Bankman-Fried at his trial. Caroline Ellison then expresses remorse, for what ultimately happened here. Whether this remorse is genuine is for others to judge. She specifically states, "I am truly sorry for what I did. I knew that it was wrong. I want to apologize for my actions to the affected customers of FTX, lenders to Alameda, and investors in FTX. Since FTX and Alameda collapsed in November 2022, I have worked hard to assist with the recovery of the assets for the benefit of customers and to cooperate with the government's investigation. I am here today to accept my responsibility for my actions by pleading guilty." Now, Caroline Ellison might be sorry that she did these things, or she might be sorry that she got caught. I would probably lean toward the latter, given she is saying sorry after the whole thing collapses, and she was seemingly complicit in some of these representations, as evidenced by her guilty pleas, so I'm not totally convinced by her expression of remorse here. But nevertheless, I will leave that for you to judge. The next question is really, what does this mean for Sam Bankman-Fried going forward? Well, it is incredibly damaging. All of these admissions really indicate that FTX and Alameda Research were operating in unison to both mislead customers about exactly what was going on with customers' funds, mislead lenders about the true balance sheet position of Alameda Research and therefore its riskiness, and potentially mislead investors, assuming those investors did any form of due diligence. And even if they didn't do any due diligence, mislead those investors about the quality of the risk management protocols at FTX. After all, if you've got Alameda Research that can run negative balances, get access to unlimited margin loans, and never be margin called, then the risk management practices are probably pretty shoddy. And if they were to represent that they are in any way close to cutting edge, then investors should be rightly aggrieved. In any case, this is going to make it very difficult for Sam Bankman-Fried to defend his charges. For him to do this, he will probably need to fall back on the idea that maybe he was a useful idiot. Maybe he was used by Gary Wang and Caroline Ellison. Maybe they were the masterminds, and he was really out of the loop. Maybe he was low tier in the hierarchy of quote-unquote partners in this group share apartment that they had. And maybe he was really just kept on the sidelines. I assume that's what his defense might run if he ultimately goes to court. The other defense he might try to run is by arguing that because FTX.com was domiciled outside of the United States, because FTX.com was not supposed to, and seemingly tried not to, take US assets, the United States might not have jurisdiction over FTX.com. And if you can demonstrate that FTX.US, the US arm of FTX, is solvent and can repay customers' funds, then you might be able to argue that the crime, if there is one, was not committed in the United States. Therefore, there is nothing for him to actually be guilty of in the United States. Rather, if there were to be a crime, it would have been in the Bahamas, not in the United States. Despite its superficial attraction, this jurisdictional argument would likely fail miserably. Now, this is clear from the fact that Caroline Ellison and Gary Wang both pled guilty and seemingly didn't even try to raise this. It's also premised on very faulty assumptions. First, if we look at the customer-related fraud, it would be premised on the idea that FTX.US is a wholly separate entity from FTX.com, and there was never any relevant fraud in relation to FTX.US, and FTX.US is perfectly solvent and customers can get their money back, which is something that SBF has asserted. The problem with this is that FTX.US does not appear to be relevantly separate from FTX.com, at least according to what John J. Ray III, who is overseeing the bankruptcy proceedings, has suggested. Second, Alameda Research is a Delaware company, which would suggest that jurisdictional issues are going to be very difficult to make out in relation to misconduct in relation to Alameda Research. Third, bodies like the SEC have already tried to assert that they have jurisdiction over cryptocurrencies wherever they might be. Now that might be a little bit tenuous and it needs to be tested at court ultimately. However, they have tried to have a very maximalist view of their jurisdiction. Presumably the Department of Justice would have similar issues. Then we have the issue of investors. Many of the investors in FTX, so companies like Sequoia for example, are based in the United States, and the relevant fraud would have occurred relevantly within the United States, even though FTX.com is a Bahamas-based company. You add on to this the fact that these investors would also have been defrauded by Alameda Research, which, Sam Bankman-Fried effectively had a controlling shareholding in, owning some 90% of the company. Nevertheless, we'll see exactly what defenses he raises when that does ultimately proceed to court. Regardless, Caroline Ellison, Gary Wang, Sam Bankman-Fried have had a truly terrible Christmas season. Caroline Ellison is facing years in prison after pleading guilty to 7 fraud-related charges. Gary Wang pled guilty to 4 fraud-related charges, seemingly less severe in magnitude than Caroline Ellison. He was seemingly pushed more toward the sidelines the longer things went on. Sam Bankman-Fried, however, is out on a $250 million bail and is going to face more charges and a lengthier jail term. Nevertheless, if you've got any thoughts about what Caroline Ellison is doing here, about whether she erred in pleading...
All right. Thanks, buddy. Finance Mark. Suffice it to say they're having a bad holiday season. Good luck, God bless. You're gonna need it. SBF and Caroline Ellison. A big fucking mess. Sorry. Another Ponzi scheme revealed. Well, that's about all the time I have. We'll have a little Hank Williams Jr. to play us out. Heck, maybe next time I'll play some music. Maybe this can be a music stream. Or on other days of the week, I could just do some music streams. Do a little guitar and singing, a little playing music. I'll have to think about that, because I actually had a really fun time impromptu on Christmas Eve, jumping into a friend's Discord server and got everything hooked up, and I played for 2 hours in a virtual tavern, and I had a blast. I got to play a private party last Thursday night, and that was appreciated. It was a little awkward, but it was appreciated. I got no complaints. Just timing wise, I wasn't sure when I was supposed to play. Anyway, that's all I got for tonight. I gotta go. I gotta milk cows at 7 a.m. and do some other stuff tomorrow. But I hope you all have a fantastic New Year's. If I don't see some of y'all before then, see you in the new year. We'll see you on the next Grand Theft World. Don't forget grandtheftworld.com for the show replays. Usually they display right here. Much more. You get the show notes. For that show, you can join the community, get a book list, check out the brain model, check out freedomunitedrevolt.com. More merch coming soon. And show notes for this and previous leftover streams can be found here. And we'll keep it going. Moving and grooving. Thanks all for stopping by, spending some time together. We're still on YouTube. Amazing. Maybe YouTube could just be a music thing, as long as it's not copyrighted. All right, let's have a little Hank Williams Jr. to play us out. Take care, everybody. Good night. See you in the new year. Be well. Be one, and all of you. Have a good night.
Thank you, Super Pickers. 1, 2. songs about a rambling man. Put old Jim Beam in my hand, 'cause you know I still love to hear those guitars sound. Don't play, I'm so lonesome I could cry. I get all balled up inside. I get whiskey bent, hellbound. And sure enough, about closing time, I'm not strong out of my mind. Yeah, I'm gonna find a honky-tonk woman I found. Just as sure as the morning sun comes, thinking of my sweet girl at home. And I get whiskey bent, hellbound. Play me the song about a rambling man. Put old cold one in my hand, 'cause you know I still love to get drunk and hear countryside.